Hello and welcome to my channel. I am Tristan Gabriel, and today I'm here with a very special guest, somebody who's appeared on my podcast before. He's a full preterist. He goes by the name of Nick Debs. What's up, Nick? How are you doing today?
Hey guys, I'm doing great. How about yourself,
Good.
Tristan?
Very, very good. We just talked about the upcoming debate with Don Preston this next Sunday. And yeah, man, I've just been studying, I know that this is pretty significant in the preterist community. So what are your thoughts on this, man? I mean, what are your thoughts on this debate? I mean, I'm thinking, what kind of weapons is Don going to use? What kind of angles he's going to use? Just what's your opinion?
So, I mean, I feel like I know how you're gonna come at this from like a very like literal view, like they were supposed to literally go up in the sky and like literally be changed to have some kind of like glorified body and stuff. Is that how you're gonna tackle this? Almost kind of like a
I can go that way.
yeah. Are you gonna come at it from maybe multiple angles? Like, look,
Mul-
here's A and B.
mhm.
Either way you spin
Multiple.
it, like it's weird.
Well, yeah, I'm glad you said that either way you spin it, because either way we spin it, like let's say it's not a literal catching away of or meeting with Christ. Um, there had to have been some sort of change in their morals, in their virtues, in their ethics. Like there had to have been at least a transformation of the mind. So if I granted that Don is correct on the covenantal change, if I'm reading Romans all the way through Revelations, or even the Gospels, there had to have been some sort of change that took place in their morals and their ethics. Like they had to have become what Jen Fishburne called a super Christian. So, like, let's say it's not a physical resurrection, it would still involve their physical brain, their morals, and their ethics. Something had to have perfected. And that is what Don has described it as, a moral perfection,
Hmm.
a restoration from that which was fallen in the garden. So that's why I was asking Don in the years ago, a couple years ago. So what was their facial expressions? What was their reactions to this? So that's my take on it, Nick. That if it's a spiritual resurrection, then it involved their spirit man, which is so intrinsic with their brain and their mind. So when they heard about the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD, that was supposedly the change to immortality. That was the meeting with Christ in the air. That was reaching those upper reaches of a spiritual perfection. So then what happened? What was the difference when they were Holy Spirit filled, and then after the perfection took place, after that climax? Did they become more loving? They become more patient, but yet they're still able to sin. So I think that sin is still a big issue. What's your take on it?
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought up the garden. After I reached out to you, I think his name was David Gates. Is that who
Mm-hmm.
you had on recently? David Gates.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I was hearing you say a lot of stuff like, oh, like and this is how not just you, but most Christians think that it was like perfect in the garden, and there was nothing going on like before then. Um, and that I just don't see it like that anymore. And this is funny. I know Don doesn't either. And they just had that conference in Montana, the Covenant Creation Conference. Are you familiar with
Yeah, oh, yeah, I heard about it.
Yeah. So and I don't share the exact same views as those guys. And I know Don doesn't, but I've heard him say like, I'm willing to look into it. I'm willing to change my mind. It just hasn't been something that has been a focus for him. And so where I'm going with this is that to me, what was going on in Genesis was kind of like talking more about the first king and priest of ancient Mesopotamia. And so God pulling somebody out from that region, from the formless and the void, the chaos that was whatever, just the nothing that was going on in ancient Mesopotamia where there was no authority and rule, and God giving somebody the whatever, the dominion, the right to rule. And so it was the first kingdom that came out, uh, that was pulled out from ancient Mesopotamia, kind of like Abraham was pulled out from Ur, and Israel was pulled out from Egypt, and Christ kind of pulled out from Israel. And so this kind of so it's more like it's talking about that than the very first human. So I do see that there was evil and sin before Adam, and this is
I don't
A-
think
a f-
Don takes that view though.
no, he
I don't.
doesn't. Yeah,
No,
yeah,
he
he
doesn't.
doesn't at all.
That's it's going to be very difficult for him. So it sounds to me, Nick, correct me if I'm wrong. You have like a kind of like a covenant creation view.
So those guys are super relatively close on a lot of that kind of understanding, where I don't
Yeah.
see it as a material creation of
Okay.
reality. Like the trees were on day 3 before there's the sun and the moon. Like that doesn't even make sense, you know.
Exactly.
And so when you throughout the rest of the Bible, I mean, animals, waters, sun, moon, and stars, trees, all that kind of stuff are analogies to people. And so I see it as like different people groups. That Adam has the one that has the covenant with God, and there's people
Yeah.
in the land that are in covenant with him, and then there's
Yeah.
like the people in the sea who aren't in covenant with him. And so a way more take like that. And so in my mind, as somebody who's thinking that this is fulfilled, this is done, I don't
Yeah.
have to have like, oh, has to be perfect before the garden where there was no sin, and why is there still sin now? Of course it can't be finished because it's not like it was like in the garden. And so like in my mind, I don't have to have that, because that's not even how I
Okay,
take.
okay,
Yeah.
well, let me ask you, since you're taking like a covenant creation view, which I would agree a lot with the covenant creation view, and many say that full preterism leads to covenant creationism, and then covenant creationism has led people to IO because of that
Yeah.
covenant view. But it's that corporate view, that covenant body view, why it opens up that door to covenant creation. Because when the full preterists want to make the body into a covenant all the time, and it's
Uh-huh.
just a corporate covenant body, well, they're going to say, well, that's what leads that door open to covenant creationism. Well, let me ask you really quickly. Let's say
Sure.
you take a covenant creationist view, or however you want to take it, taking this to me, it's a myth.
Sure.
Why is Paul charging the church to live right? Like, what is it about the Holy Spirit that changed their morals and their ethics and their values? When the Holy Spirit entered into them, they stopped sinning for the most part. At least they have now a wrestling with the mind of the Spirit, the mind of the flesh. Why is that such an important issue when they're waiting for something to be perfect? Why is it that Paul is constantly charging them to be holy, mind, body, soul, spirit? He talks about sins that are done inside the body, like sexual sins. He says that you're sinning against your body. That's a spiritual consequence. That's a spiritual death, right? That's a covenantal death. Yet you do it with your body. You do it with your physical person. Don't yield your members unto unrighteousness. Why is it? My question is, if you take the covenant creation paradigm, why are morals and ethics for the Christian and the work of the Holy Spirit within those morals and ethics? Why is that so important? Why did they have to preserve themselves blameless so that there was supposed to be a change to immortality spiritually, or a meeting with Christ spiritually, or a perfection spiritually? Why are morals and ethics so important?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I, I do think a huge part, and I don't know if this answers this exactly, but a huge part of it is like not running with a crowd or being deceived to like come back under the body of Moses. Like don't don't let anybody trick you into coming back under that covenant. Like we're under the body of Christ now. And if you are taking it as a group like that, and Christ is the head and we're his body, it almost makes sense to like fall suit on how, if the head was like that, then the body should fall suit of
Okay. What
how.
I'm trying to say, when Adam ate the fruit, was there a moral consequence? Did that affect humanity morally in their minds? Like, remember when it says like God gave them over to reprobate minds,
Sure.
um, and they changed the glory of God into corruption, and they seem to have
Ye-
a carnal mind that's at enmity with God. Do you believe that that's a product of the fall?
no, I don't think so. I think it was more of like they got kicked out of the land, they got exiled, that they weren't in like good standing with God. I'm not sure. That's a good question
Okay,
too.
okay, that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah,
Because in Don's view, he's taking the conservative route. So, like, if I take your the covenant creation view, so
yeah.
you mean to tell me that Adam was able to slap his wife Eve, murder Eve? He was morally capable of making idols, of doing homosexual acts, bestiality. He was doing that before the garden.
Well, I wouldn't say he was doing that, but yeah, I think that that was going on. Yeah, I think
So
yeah, I
humanity
don't
would have
think
been
anything changed like behavior wise once the fruit was eaten. Like we started degrading and becoming more what's the word, depraved or anything like
according
that.
to the Bible, they did. Like, right? Like Paul talks about this. They changed the glory of the incorruptible God into corruptible man. And then he starts talking about how they dabbled into homosexuality. He
Sure.
talks about how even though they did not want to retain God in their knowledge, they're rebelling against him. And in their imaginations were foolish. So Christianity says that that is a product of Adam's sin, of the fall. That's
Yeah,
why
I
the
mean,
Holy Spirit came in to change them back to how their pre-fallen state, what the last Adam was supposed to do, Christ.
yeah, I mean, I could see it as more like if you're not in the presence of God, that those kind of things maybe just follow suit, you know? That the whole point was maybe to empower them to be better than everybody else around. That's why that they were potentially given the right to rule to begin with. Hey, I'm giving you the authority. We're going to get this place in order, you know, and those who want to follow suit can come under you, and those who don't can go off and be evil and do what they want to keep doing. But I'm trying to bring order to this region, and here's how we do it. And if you're not going to obey, it's just going to go back into chaos, or you're going to look like everybody else.
So nothing really like changed in their morals, their ethics, their intellectual virtues before the human race sinned. So it's like when Adam ate the fruit, all that changed was an invisible spiritual covenant that existed in the unseen realm. But they were already like Cain would have still killed his brother if Adam and Eve didn't eat the fruit. So if they never sinned, there would be child molestation, there would still be all of this evil in the world. That was part of God's intelligent design in paradise.
Well, so I mean, I know we've talked about this before, but I just think, I mean, God gave people free will, and it's kind of on us, all that stuff.
Yeah, what I'm
And
trying to say is, but Christianity is saying that evil exists because of Adam's sin. That's why there's evil in the world. That's what Christianity is saying. The full preterist. That's why it's iffy every time I delve into the full preterist view, because that means that God must have, in his intelligent design, made Adam and Eve to already commit these horrors and atrocities. Like humanity was no different in their morals and their ethics. Even if Adam never sinned, there would still be murder. There would still be all of that, even if they didn't sin. Like God created them that way in their perfected state.
yeah, I mean, I, I think you're right. Whatever you just said right there, I think is right. I don't think that whatever Adam did is what caused humanity to become wicked.
That's interesting. I'd like to know what Don is going to say. He's never touched on this. But
Because that
yeah,
would make Adam have to be the first person, when I just don't think that's what it's
yeah.
saying, you know? I think most of Christianity is so off track. And this is, dude, a lot of this is new to me. I'm still trying to figure it out. That's why I kind of like listening to the questions that you bring up, because it's like, oh, I haven't considered that. I got to think about that more. Or, so I think it's an important, you're
Yeah,
an
I mean,
important
if you take
cog.
thank you. If you
Yeah.
take the covenant creation view, yeah, you can say that humanity has been evil like that all the time. But if I'm taking the conservative fundamental view that Adam is the very first man, that
Yeah.
Adam was innocent, I know, but the Bible does say that he didn't know good or evil, and he was naked, so he was innocent. He didn't know what good and evil was. So how does that apply to the covenant view?
Yeah, I mean, I just don't think that those terms are. I know how I've thought about it as Christians for so long,
Yeah.
that I just don't think that that's really maybe what's going. The way we've been thinking about it, I don't think applies that way. I'm not sure if I
So
have
okay,
a.
so then
Yeah,
why is it that the Holy Spirit affects us morally and ethically? Well, we're no longer drinking, we're not smoking cigarettes, we're not fornicating no more. What is the
yeah,
importance of that then? If that was already part of God's design before sin even came into the world.
yeah. I
If
mean,
that Do you see what I'm saying?
yeah. I don't even know if the Holy Spirit's for that too. I mean, I just think. I do think God is interested in you having a good life here and now. I think most people have focused so much on like what happens after you die, and it's like, oh, I got to get into heaven or you're going to hell. when I don't think really the Bible's dealing with that much at all, maybe possibly, and that it's about like having, you reap what you sow here and now, and it's like God cares about you living to your fullest, and not, and then I don't mean that in like a party kind of a way, but to just have life more abundantly, and know that you're accepted by God and loved by God, and you can trust God, and like, love others and take care of others the way God cares of you, like kind of a thing. So
Yeah. Well, I do plan to talk a lot, maybe perhaps about like the bodily return of Christ. Um, is there
in
anywhere in
what
the Bible?
way?
Well,
Towards,
and it could go anyway, right? It depends
yeah.
on what passage, because that's very important, right? Like we can get into in like manner, we can get into the Lord Himself will descend from heaven with a shout. The meeting with Christ, the term apontesis. I do plan to bring that up.
Well, let
But
me interject real quick.
go ahead.
I mean, so you're going to argue that, I mean, because Don definitely doesn't take that view that there's going to be a physical return of Christ, and
Oh,
you
well,
want
yeah,
to,
I know. I
and
know.
you want to argue that it's more likely that the text is saying that. Okay.
Well, yeah, I can do that. I can do that. But Don does believe that those that are in Hades, that they actually went up, and Don, like they were raptured up to literally meet Christ. And Don actually states in his book that Satan was supposed to be destroyed, like the demon and
Uh-huh.
all of his other demons, that they were to meet him in the air where Satan abides. So
Yeah.
Christ was supposed to destroy Satan. The dead were to witness that. They were to meet them in the air. And the living were to witness that too. And I know that you have a different view of
Yeah, that doesn't
perspective.
seem right. I mean, I love Don and I've learned a ton from Don, but
No,
that,
I'm
yeah,
glad you're saying that, because many full
yeah,
preterists disagree, but that's what's in his literature.
yeah,
And that is what many of Don's opponents, as a matter of fact, there's none of Don's opponents has brought up the passages that are in his books that I will bring up. He actually compared it to Elishas Servant, when Elishas Servant tapped into the unseen realm. And so that's why I used to put on those glasses, Nick,
yeah.
because
I've heard you say
that
that.
that's
Yeah.
the imagery that he gives. So you go, okay, so it's not as a 5'5" Jewish man, but he was supposed to destroy Satan in the air. The dead were to meet him in the air to witness his supremacy, and the living were to meet him in that region. I have the page where Don states that the living saints were to meet Christ in the spiritual realm. And how would they meet him? They had to have met him at least consciously. They've had to have tapped. That's why when he's talking about Elisha's servant tapping into the unseen realm, that's what he's comparing it to. So it's like all the Christians all throughout the world just fell like into some sort of trance, or they fell into some sort of. So that's what I would like Don to clarify. Like nobody's bringing up Elisha's servant. Where do we read Elisha's servant in the
Yeah,
King James?
I've
Where do
never
we
heard
read?
anybody say that. Yeah.
It's in his book. I have it right here. Like I have it right here. And again, I read this years ago. I believe it's on page 17. And he actually stated this in his debate with Mark Smith on MythVision Podcast. Yeah, it's on page 17, where he's talking about how the physical eye could not see the event. In 2 Kings 6, Elisha and a servant were in the city of Dothan. And then he talks about how he saw the horses, the chariots, who were invisible to the human eye. And unless the Lord opened the eyes of the viewer. Again, this is in his book, um, like clouds of glory, or like Father, like Son on clouds of glory. So Don is the one who is comparing Elisha's servant in 2 Kings chapter 6. Now, Paul never brings up Elisha's servant.
Mm-mm.
Never. So that is the mental image that Don has given me. And
So this,
so that's what
yeah,
I'm trying to say. All I'm doing, I'm just being consistent with it. I'm saying, okay, so Elisha's servant, he tapped into the unseen realm. He sees the chariot armies. That's what's supposed to happen at the coming of the Lord. The living tap into the unseen realm to meet the dead ones in the air, to witness Christ destroy Satan. They were supposed to meet him in the air.
yeah. See, this is where to me, like Dawn was a really important stepping stone into understanding like that this is finished. But
Right.
I take Satan as apostate Israel, and like the high priest and even like Herod. Like I don't take it as like some
Well, he
at
does
least
too. He does too, but sometimes he does talk about it being like a demon figure.
yeah.
I mean, because we can't say that Old Covenant Israel approached God in Job, right?
Yeah.
Or we can't say Old Covenant Israel tempted Jesus in the wilderness.
Well, no. I do think that that was like the high priest like talking to him there. Because
Oh,
right
you think it
after
was
is
the
when he
high priest?
goes.
So like
Yeah,
I know, but like all throughout, like so you don't believe that the Bible talks about like a demon figure?
the more and more I mean I have a lot for a lot of my life, but the more and more that I have been studying this out, I don't think so anymore.
So who was going up to God, talking to God
Yeah.
about Job?
That I just saw Zach Davis do a video on that, and I honestly can't remember the details, but I guarantee you there's like some type. I haven't really looked at it. Job's a book I've neglected a lot, but
Oh, okay.
I don't I don't I guarantee you this is the thing. It's like I have to literally, with all this new information, I have to put on like new glasses to reread the entire Bible with thinking like, oh, every time I read angels, it's not some supernatural being, it's just like a messenger, or every time I read Satan, it's not some supernatural entity. And it's like, so I have to like reconfigure all this stuff. But when you think about, I guarantee you it's some type of temple thing, the priests like in Job, like I haven't looked at it, and I wasn't paying attention enough when Zach talked, but I'm curious to see what he said about it.
Yeah, you know, and well, Don criticized me recently where I was talking about this, because if Satan was Old Covenant Israel, which he's disagreed with it, by the way. So Don does believe that it interchange from a demon figure to sometimes talking to Israel. Like when Paul, for example, he was talking to married couples, he said, you know, abstain from sex, but get back together lest Satan tempt you. Or are we going to say unless Old Covenant Israel tempts you?
Well, it's just
Or
Satan's just adversary, so I could just say on what the adversary of whatever's
I
good
mean,
for. Yeah.
all of Revelation, you literally have like demons. You know what I'm saying? And you have,
Well, I think for sure in Revelation he's talking about Old Covenant
yeah.
Israel. Yeah. There's,
I
in
mean, he
my
says
opinion, there's no
Satan, that
doubt
old
about that.
serpent,
Yeah.
right? He says Satan, that old serpent. What I'm trying to say is that Don does take that conservative view in certain cases.
Yeah.
If you look at page 165, we shall meet him in the air. For Paul to say we shall meet him in the air is to say that Satan has been defeated and man is now being restored to that position of fellowship he had with God before he fell. So that is what meeting Christ in the air means. It meant that Satan was to be destroyed. So I'm going to ask Don, was Old Covenant Israel destroyed in the unseen realm? Like, or is he
Or they were
referring
distorted
to
in the literal realm. I
in the
mean,
literal realm, right?
yeah.
But Satan and his demons. See, this is where I'm going to ask Don if he believes that this is referring to the fundamental conservative view of Satan, like a demon figure.
Mm.
And because if he was supposed to destroy Satan, which in the context of his book, he is talking about, he does refer to like a demon figure, then the dead in Hades were to witness that as well. And so to be caught up to meet him, we know when Paul said that he was caught up in the third heavens, right? But whether in the body or out of the body, he doesn't know. Here's what he had said, right? Like, I was caught up in the third heavens, and he processed information up in that heavenly realm. And then he remembered it, and now he's telling us about it. So he had an experience, but he doesn't know whether it was in the body or out of the body. But we know that his mind tapped into that realm. So whether Paul says he was caught up in his body or it somehow had some sort of transcendental experience, it still involved his brain. It still involved his mind to tap into that realm. He saw somebody that he did ministry with years ago, right? And there were things that were just unlawful for him to utter, is what he stated. He had a spiritual experience. That's the same catching away. That's the same Greek word that is in 1 Thessalonians 4, to be caught up. So mentally caught up, you know, like, and so Mike Sullivan actually stated that the saints had a harpazo in their hearts, that they had a catching away in their hearts. So you go, then what is that? It's like you have a hiccup, you're crying tears of joy, you're having a harpazo, an experience in your heart.
Yeah.
It has to involve the nervous system. The heart is the seat of emotion, the seat of passion. So even if they want to make it like a metaphor or they want to spiritualize it, those verbs would call for some sort of physical, visceral reaction of the living saints. And that's where we got the dancing in the streets. That's
Sure.
what
I know
Dawn
you're going to
knew.
talk about that.
Right. Well, I have to, because that
Yeah.
is, Dawn knew what the question I've been asking him for over like a year. So he already knew I was asking for a literal response. But after that, he took it back and said that he was joking. On December the 17th, I have it
Yeah.
recorded. He said that he was joking on the biggest platform of his life. And we know that he wasn't joking. He said that he was real sure. He wasn't saying things in a joking manner, but he said that he was joking. He said that he said, as it were. He says, well, I really didn't mean what I said. I have the screenshots on Facebook where he said that he was being metaphoric. And so I'm just, Nick, I'm simply just going up to Don and just asking him to clarify, some of the statements that he made. That's it. I'm not here to have a gotcha moment with him, but like, for example, here on Facebook, this was like 3 months after he made that statement. He goes, I never affirmed concretely that the saints were truly, objectively, historically dancing in the streets. I said it as possible that they were, as it were, dancing in the streets into the realm of metaphoric or speculative, or he says, or that places it into the realm of metaphoric and speculative. So Don never stated on his debate with Richard Carey, by the way, I'm being metaphoric, I'm joking, or I'm saying as it were. He actually said, I am real sure that there were lots of tears of joy and that they were dancing in the houses. He said that he was real sure. And he never once stated, Nick, that he was being metaphoric. And I know you're not here to speak on behalf of Don. I'm just saying that that is what I'm going to be asking him. And that's a fair, inquiry, right? Like he says that he was real sure they were dancing. And then 3 months later, he says, I was being metaphoric. And so
Yeah.
I just want to know, okay, then finally answer the question, like, how did they respond when they put on incorruptions, metaphorically or spiritually? How did they? It has to be a joyful event. It
Yeah,
has
I
to
just
be.
think Don's like almost and if Don, if you watch this, I love you, bro, and I'm super grateful for all the work you've done. But I do think if he's not gonna jump on the bandwagon I'm not gonna say covenant creation, but understanding that Genesis is not about the material creation of the world,
Yeah.
he's it's like he's going to be missing some stuff, and he's going to be like, that's definitely what's going on in Genesis, in my opinion. Like, there's no arguing it, really. When you understand that it's a suzerain and vassal treaty, like the first 5 books, that's what it is. They always have a prologue, kind of setting up who they are as a kingdom to give them legitimacy. And that's what Moses is doing. He's saying, hey, we have the right to rule this land because we are the legitimate rulers and the descendants of this kingdom that was before. And so he's like, that makes sense of why it's in the beginning of the book. He's setting who they are as Israelites were actually the kingdom of Adam, Adam or whatever. And so when you look at suzerain and vassal treaties, and you also understand that the suzerain, there's certain titles that they could have too. It's like the suzerain is the father, and the vassal, who's the lesser one, is the son. That's like normal terms, or the husband and the wife, or the master and the servant. And so Adam's the son of God, who's the father of the suzerain, and Adam's the vassal. Like,
Okay.
and so yeah, so those are like normal terms within a suzerain and vassal treaty. So I just think if that needs to go, like he needs to go that route to, I think, start making some corrections for his end now. Like,
I asked him about covenant creation. He's rejected it, like to the point where how you're saying it, and I agree with you. Like he would
yeah.
have to go down that route.
If he
He would
wants to
have.
refine maybe some of the errors he's made along the way in the end stuff, he has to go that route, because even and just a shout out to my boy Dallas with his YouTube video, Better Understanding the Bible, who just messaged me right now. You guys should check out his stuff, because he even does a way better job on this, like understanding Genesis from this point of view. He's on to something totally new that nobody else is doing, and doing an insane job. We've been meeting up like once a week or so and talking about it.
Nice.
And we've been doing Revelation too, and he's been showing how a lot of it's like recapitulation, but it's like Revelation 12 is starting as the birth of Christ, and he's like kind of going through and showing like the story of how Herod's like trying to kill the babies, and he's the dragon there, and he can you still see me?
Yeah, I can see you. Whoa. I don't know what happened. Nick, can't hear you. Hope all is well. just go ahead and click on the link, come back in. Yo, Objective Ethics. No, it's actually going to be happening on MythVision Podcast, you guys. So my debate with Dawn is going to be on MythVision Podcast. I'll be sure to post the link here in the channel. But yeah, I'm actually looking forward to this debate. You know, I'm coming with Dawn as a student. You know, seeing if he could persuade me and win me over to full preterism. I do plan to come at Dawn at some angles that he's never been come at before. And I plan to just simply use his books, to be quite honest. Let me go ahead and text Nick. I am going to be discussing like the experiential factor. I'll be bringing up like the conclusive arguments. Let me see. Come back on, bro. I don't know what happened. Yeah, I'm going to be talking about the conclusive arguments. You know, pretty much like how he differs from Max King. I'm going to be talking about like, you know, of course, some of the implications of the Israel only doctrine, their conclusiveness. You know, I'll have to bring some of that up, you know, if I granted to him that the resurrection took place. But I like how Nick is, you know, looking at the covenant view of Genesis, like the covenant creation view. Yeah, I think that, you know, full preterism helped me to see a lot of that too, you know. So no, I don't believe that either. Yeah.
Am I back on now? Can you see me?
Yeah, you're back on. Yeah, you're back on.
Okay. Okay. Just double checking.
Yeah, I don't know.
That was weird.
But you're good.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead. What were you saying? Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to speak for Dallas. He put out a video on Revelation 12 and chiasm, and he's going to do Revelation 20. We went through. He's seeing some cool stuff in Revelation 11 that we were talking about last night. But yeah, just a shout out to him, guys. If anyone's interested in that, I think he's doing even a way better job than Tim Martin and Steve Magua and all those other guys. So
that's funny. That's funny.
And he's not anywhere near as big. So just you guys should check out his stuff because he's doing something really cool.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I like some of your input, you know what I mean? Especially with the covenant creation stuff, you know. There's so many ways that this debate coming up can go, you know, there's so many ways. But yeah, I do plan to come at Don with some angles that he hasn't come before. But at the end of the day, you know, I respect Don, you know what I mean? Like I'm simply coming.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I'm simply coming on to be persuaded, you know, like persuade me, Don. I have some sincere questions that's holding me back from believing his theology, from believing his doctrine. So yeah, you know, I do plan to ask him like, you know, what he believes before Adam and Eve sin. And I think that's going to be a huge problem for him.
Yeah, it is.
He doesn't take your view. Your view, you could readily admit there was evil that was happening before Adam and Eve. But I don't believe Don is going to admit that. But then he wants to say that we were perfected or morally perfected. So here they had the Holy Spirit. Then what was that next level? What was the change in their virtues? And this is why the full preterists have been criticized of sin still existing. They ask full preterists, do you still sin? Some say no. Some have said, no, I don't sin, because they know that if to be perfected like Adam, or at least in the pre-fallen state, then you wouldn't be able to sin. Like the angels in heaven, they never marry, nor there'd be some sort of mortal or immortal state. There had to be a next level of spirituality.
Yeah, I mean, biblically, I don't think. I mean, a sin is to like go against the law. I don't, you know, and which is not. We're not transgressing the law anymore. So biblically, I don't think we're sinning. And what would happen before, and what happened to Adam, what happened to Israel? They kept getting kicked out. They're exiled. Just whereas under this, the new covenant, there is no exile. You know, so that's what I think, that God's with you now, and there's nothing you can do to kick him, you know, send him away, or you go away from him. So that's the difference, you know. Where I think, and this is more new to me because I was on the bandwagon with them, but and what I believe they believe is that the new heavens, the new earth didn't happen until the temple fell. Is that where they take? Like that's when the new heavens.
Everything is
70 AD.
Yeah, the causal connection, the emergence of the new heavens and new earth, even if it's metaphoric or spiritual, however you want to interpret it.
Sure. What Dallas has definitely introduced some ideas to me where I'm having to rethink about a bunch of stuff, but because he's posts the new heavens and the new earth is the resurrection, like the cross, like that's when the new covenant man came out, he died under the law and he was resurrected in the new covenant, and that's when the new heavens and the new earth started. Then, not at 70 AD when the
Yeah.
temple fell.
Yeah.
So that
Well,
changes a bunch of stuff when you take it that way.
yeah. Yep, you do. You're probably going to talk a lot about like the metaphoric language stuff. It's like I think with Don, he likes to omit the physical when it comes to like a spiritual or a metaphoric phrase. But many times in the New Testament, the physical is still very much implied.
Like
Like, for
elaborate a
example,
little bit. Yeah, yeah.
okay, yeah, like for example, like you see, like Christ says, I'm the bread of life. Okay.
Hmm.
I'm the living water. Those are physical things that it's physical, spiritual, and metaphor. Baptism, for example, if you're baptized in water, you have physical water. It's a spiritual experience, and it symbolically, metaphorically symbolizes your death with Christ, the triad. You have physics applied, you have spiritual applied, you have metaphor applied. What Don wants to do is take out the physical part only when it comes to the meeting with Christ in the air and the changed immortality. But other places, there is physics applied. Like, for example, you have he heals our diseases, our infirmities. When Jesus would perform a miracle, he would say, as Isaiah has spoken. Well, in Isaiah's day, that was just poetic metaphor. But here is Jesus literally healing physically, and he's pulling from Isaiah. You see what I'm saying?
Hmm.
Another one, prime example, and Don has never got hit up by a Pentecostal like me.
Mm.
But in 1 Corinthians 14, you have Paul talking about speaking in tongues.
Yeah.
And this is a spiritual experience. And Paul is drawing from Isaiah, and he says, with stammering lips and other tongue, I will cause the weary to rest. My people will speak. Well, in Isaiah's day, there wasn't people speaking in tongues. So here, Paul is drawing from Isaiah, talking about an observable spiritual reality, speaking with tongues, and it was for the sign for the unbeliever. So they would hear it. They would hear the speaking in tongues. They would hear the prophecy. They would fall down and be converted. That was the whole point of speaking in tongues. That
Yeah.
is a spiritual experience. So you have spirit. He's using it metaphorically when he's bringing up Isaiah. He said, with stammering lips and other tongue. There weren't people speaking in tongues filled with the Holy Spirit in Isaiah's day. And
No.
Paul is using that. He's reforming it. We call it Pesher.
Yeah.
Don and Dr. Richard Carrier talked about this. I
Mm.
have it tattooed on my arm, sensus plenior, when a New Testament author, it's a hermeneutical principle, when a New Testament author draws upon the Old Testament and adds on a spiritual meaning or adds on a deeper sense. And the Old Testament prophets didn't know the timing, they didn't know the nature of these prophecies. So only the New Testament authors knew that. So the New Testament authors have that right to spin it, to twist it, to reform it, to revolutionize it, to make it however they want. And so what Don wants to do, he says, well, it's being metaphoric, or it's just metaphoric language. Yes, but there still has to be a physical application to it. You know, let me
Probably
give
depends
you
on what, but yeah, I see your point.
no, there's a lot. Like, okay,
Yeah.
so like when Don likes to use when they were translated from darkness into his marvelous light. It's like, well, it's not literal physical darkness, not literal light, right? But it still applied to them physically because that was about their new birth experience. And the Holy Spirit filled them. They were most likely rejoicing. They were people cry. They have to confess with their mouth. That's physics, that Christ is their Savior, that to believe in the Lord with all their heart. They get baptized in physical water. You see what I'm saying? That was
Yeah,
their
yeah.
translation from darkness into their, it was still an experiential physical factor to that metaphoric language. And so Don wants to say, oh, there's nothing physical. So that's why I kept asking him, okay, so all those all throughout the world, of tribes, every tribe, tongue, nation, kindred, how did they experience the metaphor? The most important event in human history. This is supposed to be the most important event in human history. And Don is struggling to describe how they experience this. It's just the most, to me, it's just the most common sense thing ever. The rapture is false. Leaving the rapture behind, Tim LaHaye and the dispensationalists are false. So then what is he replacing it with? And this is where he talked about the dancing in the streets, because he knew something had to have happened, something visceral, something joyful. So that's why he said that he was real sure that there were lots of tears of joy. He got cornered. Unless you're going to say nothing, he'd have to say nothing happened. But that's foolishness. Something happened. It's the most historical event in human history, the return of Christ.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, the wrath happened, the vindication of,
What about the reward? What about the rewarding that was on the backside of that? That's the judgment part. But he was supposed to reward every man according to their works. What's the rewarding part?
their inheritance, I guess. Like,
well, what was it?
I would say, I mean, to me, it seems like the inheritance would be, it's funny. We and Dallas were just talking about this. I can't remember what the hell he said, but to me, it would be like, it would be kind of like the good standing position of.
They already had that though, but they already had that. That's what I'm trying to say. They already had that. They had a propitiation. If they sin, they confess with their mouth. They had a propitiation. They had forgiveness with God. They already had that when they entered into the new covenant. That's why they were Holy Spirit filled. And that Holy Spirit was to cause some sort of climax. That Holy Spirit was supposed to have a consummate. It was supposed to be a wedding. It's supposed to be romantic. So the only romance is what? Women cooking their children in the 70 AD? That's supposed to be a romantic event? The only way to make this romantic is if the wife meets the groom. You get to see Jesus. But that would be romantic. But
I mean, I think that's also just metaphorical language, like, I mean, the marriage thing. It's like there's a real marriage going on.
I understand it's metaphor, but it's something rejoiceful, right?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's the gist of it, right? You're going to get married, and there's a consummation, a marriage supper of the Lamb. That's supposed to be an optimistic, happy event. You're getting married to the lover of your soul. You're going to see Christ somehow. A marriage ceremony is a rejoiceful, happy, exuberant event. You see what I'm saying?
For sure.
It was a victorious event, right? Like their spirit was supposed to be saved. They were supposed to have this glory to God, hallelujah moment, right? Like, it's supposed to be a happy thing, meeting Christ in the air, metaphorically. That's a good, happy thing.
Yeah, I mean, I know me and you talked about this a lot when the first time we talked, but I mean, to me, that verse is he's just comforting them about the dead, like, I don't take that verse anywhere near like what most people take it like I really think he's just comforting them about the dead, and that's it. Like, I don't take the whole caught up in the air. It has anything to do with anything like most people think. We spent a good 10, 15 minutes talking about that last time. I don't know if you remember, but
yeah.
But dude, Dallas said something super good. I wish I had remembered it about the inheritance. Crap. Sometimes I wish I had a better memory.
Well, in the age to come, they would inherit something, right? In that age to come, and it's like, well, what do you inherit? It's something it's something that's invisible. It's a contract with God and you, but there's nothing that your brain is going to process. Like, your brain is not going to know nothing about it. And so when Don is comparing it to Elishas servant, tapping into the unseen realm, processing information, that's where I'm thinking, okay, so then Don messed up with that Elishas servant. So like, how do you receive the inheritance if you're living hundreds of miles away from Jerusalem? You know what I'm saying?
Well, I mean, yeah, for sure. But the inheritance isn't like anything physical. So, I mean, I don't think it is.
It's spiritual. That's what I'm trying to say. How did they know when it crossed their minds, the living saints?
Yeah.
How did they know, oh, this is my inheritance?
Yeah. I mean, it's a good question that I really don't know. Yeah, a good answer to it.
Here's another one. Yeah. Maybe you could ask. Here's one I'm going to be asking Don. The Jewish persecutors, right? Like, he believes that there was a mass body of Jewish persecutors that were all throughout the nations persecuting Christians. There's zero evidence of this, by the way, of a mass body of Jews.
Jewish persecuting the Christians, or people was.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I feel like that's what the whole New Testament's about. It's like the book of Acts and like.
Right. Well, there's no history of a mass body of Jews going out and persecuting Christians. Okay.
Yeah,
But let's say that's the case. Let's just say that is the case. So here's my question is, so those Jewish persecutors that were going all throughout the nations, right? When Jerusalem fell, those Jewish persecutors were still hundreds and thousands of miles away. Like, God did not physically bring in all of the Jewish persecutors into the city gates. Like, he didn't like round them all up physically or spiritually, right? He
Well, I
didn't he
mean,
didn't say he didn't say every Jewish persecutor, I'm going to just round them all up and put them in the city gates and then bring my judgment on them. So when the judgment happened, you still had Jewish persecutors that were not affected by it because they were out there trying to reach those Christians that were hundreds of miles away.
well, I mean, they're definitely not going to be persecuting him anymore. They'd be like, "Holy
Why?
shit, these
Okay, my
Christians were
question:
right."
why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't they? What
I
is
mean,
if
if
they're like,
their
yeah, like
whole
let's say
religion and their whole system,
that
which in their
probably
whole
fuel the
city,
fire even more. They'll probably fuel the fire even more. So this is what I'm trying to say. Like hundreds
I
of
would
miles
think
away. Well, see, that's what I'm trying to say. So a
maybe.
Christian, so a Christian goes this, like they're like a roaring lion, right? They're like they hate Christians. They're seeking to devour them. So then they find out, or a Christian says, "Hey, even though we're living in Corinth, hundreds of miles away, put your stone down. You cannot persecute me anymore. You love me now." Because your temple's destroyed. And the Jewish persecutor goes, "Oh, all right, I won't persecute you no more."
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, I see the point you're trying to make, but it's like,
What's to stop them? What's to stop them from going after them?
I mean, the whole point though is they're all Jews too. You know, like, I mean, if you're an IO, you'd understand that all these people are actually Jews, and it's not like the way we normally think. We almost think about it. It's like all the Greeks and the pagans are like, that's how, when I feel like most people think about the church, and it's like not the Jewish people, you know, and but
Right,
it's
but
like,
I'm talking about the Jewish persecutors because remember
yeah.
they were supposed to experience relief from their persecutors.
Well, so the point that I was making is like, once all this, when the wrath did come, they would all be like, holy shit, we were wrong. You know, I could see them trying to figure some shit out and being
What?
like,
So no, what would
stopping,
stop?
like,
Okay, so let's say they didn't find out until years later. They're
well, that
living
would,
a
I mean,
thousand. They're living 1,000 miles away. So how would
well,
they know Jerusalem fell for only 5 months, and
I,
yet they're still killing Christians? What's to stop them?
so yeah, I know you make that point a lot, but I don't, they all had to travel to Jerusalem multiple times a year, did they
Okay, so
not?
that's what I'm trying to say. But they did not. God did not gather them all at once. He would
Yeah.
have to gather every single Jewish persecutor, all kind of like Noah's Ark. He rounded about all the animals. Is that what he did with the Jewish persecutors? He just said, "I'm going to gather them all up and lock them in the city gates." God
Yeah.
didn't do that. So you have many Jewish persecutors all throughout the nations. And let's say, so then the Christian goes, "Hey, put your stone down. You can't kill me and my family. Your temple is destroyed." And they have to go, "All right, I won't kill you anymore."
Yeah, I
I
think you're kind of like cartoon making that almost like a cart. Don't you think
that's what
most
makes
Jews?
that's what makes it. But why wouldn't that fuel the fire even more?
I mean, if I would probably be like, holy shit, these people were right. Like, why are we going to keep? The whole point was they were
Is
trying to
there
be
any
like, no,
is there
Moses
any
is right.
is there any history that the Jews did this?
Well, I mean, I would say most Jews probably lived in Jerusalem, did they not? I mean,
Yes,
don't
but
you think?
most Christians didn't. Most Christians that the Jews were trying to reach and persecute were thousands of miles away,
Yeah,
scattered all around. And they're
yeah. I
trying to
mean,
reach them. You see what I'm saying? They're
no,
trying to reach
I
them.
see the point that you're making for sure. It would be cool to know what happened,
But
history
there's
at this
nothing,
time, like a
there's
little
no
bit more
history. I
better.
know, but there's no history on it. There's no history of the Jews hearing about it. They're thousands of miles away from Jerusalem. They're looking for Christians to kill them, like Paul. They're just out there, just an organized group, like a militia. They're looking for Christians, and then they hear about the destruction of Jerusalem. They go, "Hey, did you hear about the fall of Jerusalem?" They go, What happened?" "Yeah, the Roman soldiers came and started murdering women and children." And they go, "Man, I don't hate the Christians no more. I'm actually now on their side."
Yeah, I
Where
would be.
in history does that happen?
Are you familiar with maybe what Josephus talks about, like what happened to the Jewish community like after the fall of the temple? I know a bunch of them got sold to slavery to Egypt, like Moses said in Deuteronomy, that would happen. So I always thought that was
But
cool.
that's what I'm trying to say. It would have to be for every single one. every single Jewish persecutor had to have been carried away or exiled.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, this was what happened. It was the Jews in Jerusalem. I mean, we don't really. Maybe they were attacked elsewhere too. I don't know. But where I was going with
that's what I was trying to say.
Yeah.
He's saying that there's a mass body of Jews going all throughout the nations persecuting Christians
After the fall of the temple, or
no,
before?
No, I'm talking about before.
I mean, the Bible does record that that's going on, though. I mean, that's what's
okay.
like.
Okay, yeah, but again, those living thousands and hundreds of miles away, if there was a militia, they would have to be traveling those thousands of miles away. And then when Jerusalem fell, where is there any Bible that states, and your persecutors will love you, they will no longer hate you, and the Jews will stop throwing stones at you once they see that the temple
I'm
fell?
sure there was still fighting, but but I do think once they realized their whole temple fell, their whole system was gone, they probably had bigger fish to fry than like beef with these people. You know what I mean? I'm not saying that they're that completely stopped, but I would just think that those who didn't get sold into slavery and those who understood that the temple was completely destroyed and their whole Rome had come against them is like, now Rome was coming against them. So they probably had bigger fish to fry for them to go against the Christians. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but so then they stopped hating the Christians after the temple was destroyed.
Well, I don't know if they stopped hating them, but I just think
okay, that's bigger. What was to stop them from physically persecuting them? Because Don says that was the end of persecution. I'm thinking, well, they probably wouldn't even found out the temple was destroyed for months or years later. So after the temple was destroyed, the Jewish persecutors all throughout the nations, they didn't hear about it.
Well, so I also think you're fixating.
They're out there on a mission like Paul to go and kill them and to go and persecute them. But they're not hearing about Jerusalem until months or even years later. So here they are, they're still killing Christians, they're still persecuting Christians months after Jerusalem fell.
So,
and then when they hear about it, they go, oh man, our mission's done. I'm going to stop persecuting Christians now.
So let's just think about this for a little bit more. There's no way it's years later. News travels back then. Like this is the Rome, and Jews had to literally travel to Jerusalem every year, for sure. Every year
there were Christians who were on islands. That's where Paul got bit on a snake.
Yeah, but
but I'm trying to say is even if it wasn't Rome, there was still providences that were so far away that it would take months or years.
But let's just like think about this for a second. So even though if it didn't all stop like at a fingertips, I'm saying their entire system was destroyed over time, even if it's over the next year, and they realize, oh, Rome's coming against us now, that they have bigger fish to fry than to mess with the Christians. And who knows, maybe persecution wasn't going on in every single one of these places. So I'm saying once, it's not like it had to all happen that instant and it was boom, it was done. Even if it was a progressive laying off, a lot of them got carried away. The whole system broke down. Rome's coming against us.
I agree. The only thing is that there's no history on it. That's the whole thing. You see what I'm saying?
But I'm just saying, logically thinking about it, like that makes sense to me. Like
it can happen. It can happen, but there's still no history, so there's no evidence.
Sure. Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? So even if that is the case, the fact that there's no historical evidence to support that, it just goes to show maybe it's because there wasn't a mass body of Jews that was out there persecuting Christians. Maybe there was a sect, but we're talking about a massive body, like all the Jewish persecutors. Like how many? Did they have 1 million in their militia? Did they have, and not only that, you still had, what about the Gentiles who were persecuting Christians? There were Gentiles who rejected the gospel. How were they judged? Like your common sinner Gentile, like they went out to preach the gospel and they were not Jews, they were true Gentiles, and they just rejected Jesus and they didn't like Christians. How did they get judged?
Yeah. I want to, do you know if there's like some records, like does Josephus talk about like what happened after 70 AD and like what was the Jews were up to like after? I don't know.
Not very much, but a lot of stuff that even Josephus says is very specious, not even the full preterists accept everything that he states.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously, but and I'm it's just, dude, it's so long ago, but it's like, yeah, I am curious to what for the 30 to 50 years after the fall of the temple, what was the Jewish community really up to besides the ones, obviously the ones that got sold into slavery,
Well,
but like,
they continued, like the laws, they still continued practicing their laws, they didn't all just extinct,
yeah, I mean, the laws were centered around the temple, so I don't know how they're really keeping
they still
things.
practiced it. That's why you still have the Jews that still
Well,
practice it, all throughout medieval history, all throughout, they still have
yeah,
it.
they practice their fake made up ones that aren't from the Torah, and all their laws they added to it and stuff they had to change and stuff. But so,
Probably just like what they're doing now, reforming it, right?
dude, you can't wipe your butt on the Sabbath because unless you
Yeah.
fold the toilet paper
Yeah.
and have it all folded and ready to go.
Yeah. Well, look, here's some basic questions. Let me say, does the Bible ever state that Christ will not return in his body? Like, does the Bible emphatically state? And by the way, some of you Gentiles, you Greek learning Gentiles, even though I'm writing in Greek, Christ will not return in his body.
To me, I don't see him physically returning at all. The one verse that I feel that they all go to is Acts 1. But when you understand that he left in a cloud, why would the angels not be just backing up what Jesus said all the time, which is, I'm coming on the clouds, which everybody knows Yahweh came on the clouds a bunch in the Old Testament. And so for them to think like Acts 1 is like, and I gotcha, in my opinion, it's the exact opposite. I'm like, how the hell do you not see this as them just saying he's coming back on the clouds?
Because they said, as you have seen him go up, as you have seen the cloud take away, he's going to come in like manner as you've seen him. So, in other words, they switched the ontology. They switched from being a literal ascension to now a metaphoric language.
Well, yeah. But I mean, we talked about this on our first time too, but it's like, I just think they're talking about the cloud there.
Okay, but is there anywhere, like, if I ask a futurist, is there anywhere in the Bible that states that Christ was not going to return in their lifetime?
This too.
The
Well, hold on.
Yeah, go ahead.
So futurists also, if they want to hammer on this likewise manner, did he leave on a horse with a sword in his mouth? Because he's supposed to come back the same way he left, right? Like, that's a stupid argument. Like,
well, what I'm saying is, if I were to ask a futurist, is there anywhere in the Bible where Christ and the disciples said that he will not return in their lifetime? He's going to come 2,000 years later. They struggle with that because there is no verse that says, oh, by the way, he will not return. They'll try to say, no man knows the day or the hour. They'll try to say it's not for you to know the times and seasons, but there's no emphatic statement that says Christ will not return in your lifetime.
Yeah. So
Every full preterist would agree with that. Every full preterist would agree. They're going to say right because he said he was going to return in their lifetime. So on that same token, as simple as possible, is there anywhere in the Bible where it says Christ will not return in his body?
I mean, no, I don't think so.
I can't think of one either. Like, where does it say, oh, by the way, you Greeks that are so Greek-minded, some of you guys may be thinking that Christ is going to return in his body, but you don't understand Hebraic metaphor because you weren't raised as a Hebrew. You were raised as a Greek. So let me teach you Hebraic metaphoric language. You see what I'm saying? So the Gentiles, they probably most likely would have thought that Christ was going to return in a body. And where does Paul say, well, that's because you don't understand the way that we speak as Hebrews?
Yeah, I mean, that's probably true that some people thought that even then, but like, that's probably part of why we're so far off. Like, because
right. So then where in the Bible does it just simply state, just like I would a futurist, that Christ will not return in his body? Like he says, Christ will not return or come in his 5'5" Jewish body or a glorified body. Where does it emphatically and just simply state that? Just like I would a futurist, where does it state that Christ will not return in their lifetime? And it doesn't. So then on that same token, where does it state that he will not return in a body?
Yeah. I mean, even if he did return in a body, it's like, to me, and I mean, this is obviously like an argument for like a futurist, but it's like, I don't know how more clear God could have been with the time text. It's like, he says it like 100 different ways, like in almost every book of the New Testament. And it's like, I don't understand how anybody could come to this conclusion if you were being honest and just reading what it says. Like this, there's no way like this. You were telling me it lasted longer than the entire Jewish reign of 1500 years. We're 500 years past that, and it was supposed to be coming quickly in a little while, and he won't delay.
Right.
But we're 500 years past the entire history of the Jews.
Like, I know that's why I ask Christians. I say, where does it state that Christ will not return in their lifetime? Because it takes a while to understand the time statements, right? To respect it and honor it, right? For the futurists, like they have to say, okay, these time texts, soon, near, all that. I have to get into their mind in the first century and say, look, they would have expected it in their lifetime. So then they could flip around. I remember I was debating Sam Frost. And I asked him, I said, where does it state? I asked Sam Frost this. I said, where does it state that he will not return in their lifetime? And he says, where does it state that he will? Where does it state that he did? and so then you get into the expectancy. Well, they expected it. And he says, no, they didn't. He said, like, he literally said, and even Don commented on it. He said, whoa, like, so that's what I'm trying to say. I'm just trying to make it as simple as possible. There's nowhere in the New Testament that says that Christ is not going to return in his body.
Yeah.
You could pull the metaphoric language. Well, Yahweh didn't come in a body on the clouds, but I get all of that. I understand all of the.
Yeah, I know.
I understand all the, okay, so just as simple as possible, where does it state that he's not going to return in his body?
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing of having a kingdom without, I mean, obviously it doesn't state that explicitly. Like, there's no point in arguing because it doesn't.
Right, it doesn't state that explicitly. Right, and that's all. That if it really wanted to communicate that he was not going to return his body, that would have been just so simply put right there in the Bible.
Well, yeah, they could have said a lot of things way more plainly.
Yeah, just like I would tell the futurists, look, if God wanted humanity to wait thousands of years later, why doesn't he just say it will be thousands of years in your future? So those of you standing here will not taste of death. It's going to be thousands of years into the future. Where in the Bible does it state that it will be thousands of years in the future? That's what we tell a futurist. He goes, doesn't state that. Where does it state that Christ is not going to return in their lifetime? Doesn't state that. It's just so simple. And we're trying to gather all the data that we get from all the verses to try to find, can we find something? Like, no, it's not there. Same thing with the bodily return. So it's like we have to do all these loop arounds just to show that Christ was not going to return in his body. But the Bible never just emphatically states that he will not return in his body, which is what many Greeks would interpret, which is what many Gentiles would expect. They would have to learn the Hebraic metaphoric language that Don is trying to introduce. Sure. Paul would have to teach them Hebrew ABCs, 1, 2, 3s, and Hebrew metaphors, not Greek metaphors, because the Greeks believed in physical bodily stuff, like turning into a real angelic being. Don says that is not the mindset that you should have, that you should think like a Hebrew, an ancient Hebrew. So that means that when Gentiles were converted, Paul had to say, now, by the way, us Hebrews, we speak in allegories and we speak in metaphors. We don't mean physical stuff.
Yeah, I mean,
you have to teach them that.
Well, just think about it. I mean, Paul would spend years at some places. How much, if you recorded everything he told us, people, how many books would it fill? All we have is like a couple measly letters. Like, it's like, who the hell knows what they were saying in person, you know? If in fact these are real people, like, you know, I mean, some people.
I get it, and maybe I might ask Don that, because Don is the one who is giving us the lesson of the Hebraic metaphor. Where does Paul teach us Gentiles that? Where does Paul come around and say, oh, by the way, even though I'm writing in Greek, and I'm drawing upon the Old Testament, I don't want you to mistakenly think that I'm talking physically here. I'm only speaking metaphorically. He would have to teach that to a Greco-Roman mind, which is the majority of Christians. They would have to have, here's lesson 1, lesson 2.
Even the Jews themselves, the ones who knew Hebrew, and I guarantee you also had this problem. They were Hellenized, they were Persianized. I think Zoroastrianism infected a bunch of stuff for them and the church today. I know we talked about that last time too, but it's like, so I even think even the people who were Jews and knew Hebrew didn't understand as well, let alone people who were, you know, straight up Greeks or the dispersed, forgotten about, the Jews who weren't Jews, you know what I mean? Like, so everybody had that problem. This is a huge part of why I think we've come so far off, and why things are maybe coming into more focus now, is because literacy is up. We have it at our fingertips at any time. We have all these tools. We can look up lexicons. We can look up the Greek. We can look up the Hebrew. It's like we've got time to study. We have the internet to be able to bounce ideas off of people all over the world. So to think that we're not going to like come to a bunch of new understanding would be pretty stupid. And so I think we're just having like this renaissance of understanding. And in my opinion, if Don doesn't hop on board with understanding what Genesis is not about the material creation, he's gonna like, I don't know. I'm not.
He's gonna struggle. I agree with you 100%. Like he might as well take that covenant view. But and how far do you take that covenant body? As a matter of fact, in William Bell's book, The Two Shall Become One Flesh, where he supports polygamy, he states that wife is a covenantal term, that it's a covenantal body. He pushes it so far to say that wife is a covenant body, and therefore you could have multiple wives. So when you say I have a wife, I'm speaking of plurality in a covenant body. That is how far that, and I might ask Don this, because this is pertaining to the resurrection, morals, and ethics. And so everywhere I read, bro, like I read in Romans 5-6, like we're baptized into his death, we come in the newness of life. Don't yield your members to unrighteousness, but righteousness, be sanctified, holy, mind, body, soul. It's like Paul is correcting them of sin all the time. He's like, he's charging them to live right. He's charging them to be moral and ethical by the Holy Spirit, right? Like through the Holy Spirit to walk in holiness, because there was going to come a day where something was going to happen so they could be blameless or rewarded. So what was the whole point of living right and not having sex with your father's wife and not sinning against your body? Because he had said that they're like, for example, let me say this. He said, like, there's a man who's a fornicator, deliver him over to Satan for the destruction of his flesh, so that his spirit will be saved on the day of the Lord. That his spirit will be saved on the day of the Lord. So then what was the whole point? So after Roman soldiers besieged Jerusalem, did they become a super Christian like Jen Fishburne states? Did they become more virtuous? Did they become sinless, or at least something near that, where they sin less? They're struggling with the flesh and the spirit and their psychology. Even Paul says, like, the evil that's in me, that which I would not do, that I do, right? In Romans 7, he's like, there's a warring in my members. There's like a psychological warring. You see what I'm saying? So then once that consummation, that perfection, that enlightenment, that altered state of a spiritual reality, then what was that climax? What was that was permanent? It was supposed to be a permanent change. So then what happened in AD 71? So here's AD 70. What happened in AD 71? Were they more perfect? Were they more holy?
I mean, maybe there's like, and I'm not anywhere near as familiar with this view, and I've heard some stuff from Ed Stevens that is insane, but like, because I don't think he takes the covenant creation stuff either, and so I've heard him say like ridiculous things. But I mean, maybe especially as someone who thinks this is a myth, that this story really is saying that when Jesus came back in wrath, simultaneously took them up. Maybe that is what it's saying, and that this is what that story is saying, and then the kingdom's eternal forever because it's in heaven, and nothing can, and then it's done. The story's over and has nothing to do with anything anymore. And this was just like the Jewish myth.
I know Ed Stevens doesn't admit that, but Don has admitted that if that was the case, then Christianity did end and there is no relevance. So that's why he's fighting for that covenantal change.
Yeah.
I would say Don concede to Ed Stevens. I would say Don concede to what you believe, Nick, about covenant creation. It would do him better.
So the point, so Dallas doesn't take the Ed Stevens view, but he thinks that there is absolutely no relevance whatsoever. Besides that, this is a book for us to be like that God's trustworthy and that we can glean from this and that we can call on the same God of Jesus, like, and that's it, like that this has nothing to do with anything anymore, like, and it's just for us to glean from and call on that same God and that God's trustworthy because it did finish and it did happen and it's done, like. So I'm really trying to step into the shoes of what Dallas has been saying because it's such a different view. And it took me a year and a half to really hear all these full preterist guys. And now I'm having to like circle back because I think Dallas is making lots of really good points. And I still haven't even processed it all. And some of the points he's making.
Yeah, we got to do a stream together. We were supposed to do one. We got to do it again. He told me he was busy. We got to do one.
Yeah, he said he would like he doesn't have time to like prepare. I guess he's got like points he wants to like hammer you, whatever, answer your questions. And I'm just like, look, I don't know. Let's just talk about it. It's fun. Like, but so he was like, got to put together like a presentation or something.
I mean, for the full preterist, there's different versions, right? Like, there's so many out there. So it's like for me, I have to just target what Don is going to say. But this is a very interesting passage of scripture. BC or B camp for light. Ezekiel 36:27. I will put my spirit within you and cause you to walk in my statutes. You will keep my ordinances and do them. So
that's a good point. Why were they supposed to be holy? Because God said they were supposed to be, like, maybe that's just enough. And if he was coming back and it was finished and he did take them, he's like, look, if you're not doing this, I'm not going to take you. Like, kind of a thing. You're just going to get the wrath of the rest of them.
Yeah, so they're more right. So their moral and ethical actions could have disqualified them.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see. It'd be interesting to see if Don believes in once saved, always saved. He'd be interested to see that because,
even in Revelation, when he's talking to the churches, he's like telling them, like, you better get your shit together. Like,
yeah, but for what? So that when the Roman soldiers besieged Jerusalem and women cooked their children, you look at that and you go, look, because of our wedding.
No. I mean, maybe we're onto something here. Like,
that's right. They were supposed to be sanctified and holy because their husband Christ was that way, and they were to meet and marry their husband Christ and to be joined with him. So that's why they were supposed to be like him. But you're saying, well, they're not literally supposed to meet him. The only observable thing is women cooking their children for 5 months. That is the only thing, according to that version of full preterism, that they would have processed and experienced, or they would have heard about it months later, thousands of miles away. Did you guys hear about the destruction of Jerusalem? Yep. That's it. You guys, we're married now. We're married to Christ. Glory to God.
I see your point.
And they're all rejoicing and dancing in their houses. And then I ask Nick, okay, but what if it was their friends and their family that was out there in the city gates?
Yeah,
what if
I remember.
Just like 9/11, just like the Holocaust, just like any travesty that takes place, when there's a persecution that's happening and you're being locked in, potentially your friends and your family, at least those who you were trying to witness to, you're trying to bring them to church, tell them about the gospel, they rejected you, God's going to judge them all. So like God would have to bring every single sinner who rejected the gospel and just huddle them in the gates of 70 AD. So if they were living in Corinth and Galatia and Ephesus, he'd have to gather them all in, kind of like the great white throne judgment imagery, and then just judge all the Jews and judge all the sinners. But he didn't do that. So how did the sinners, those who rejected Christ, the scoffers who were mocking Christ, where's the promise of his coming? What if they were living 1,000 miles away from Jerusalem? They're going to be like, well, I better get to Jerusalem so God can judge me. I'm going to start traveling for months so that I could be locked in the city gates so God can judge me.
So, I mean, to me, as we're talking about this, I'm saying I don't have a problem going, you know what, maybe this has absolutely no relevance to me whatsoever. Doesn't mean God's not real to me. Like, I know me and you, I have said that conversation before. I met God that having nothing to do with this. I came into it later on, but it's like, so if it's completely finished and maybe like what we're saying, maybe he did, he wrathed them and took them all at the same time and it's completely finished and there is no relevance at all, besides like what we talked about earlier. Like, I don't have a problem with that if that is the case. I'm not saying that it is. Some people are obviously going to have a major problem that their whole world would.
Yeah,
Like,
if you're gonna have at least a little bit of that evangelical mindset, like what you just said right there is heresy. You know what I'm saying? Like
obviously, yeah.
according to Christianity, I wouldn't have a problem with it either. That's why when I was a full preterist, I held to Ed Stevens' view. That whole just they were taken away, they were taken up. Now, if it wasn't that, and the IO is correct, like it all happened then, and there's no relevance. That really is an eye opener. Like the fact that your mind has got there, that's a huge, to me, that's a huge milestone in my humble opinion. Like the fact that you've reached that, that's great to me, because it's funny because full preterism is what brought us there. At least I can speak for myself. It brought me to even entertain those thoughts.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
It's just that's what I'm saying. John
See,
Preston was a massive influence of the stepping
massive.
stone.
That's what I'm trying to say. So where you're at right now, that statement that you made, like I wouldn't have no problem with it. And God still exists. That's where I'm at. You could still see now whether Yahweh still exists or if Yahweh was not a tribal deity, that's up for discussion. But I still believe there could be a mind or a God out there, a simulation. Let me see here. It says eternal inheritance of the Lord Yahweh's righteousness. They were either receiving reconciliation or being cut off of His presence forever. So. We're talking about 70 AD. It's actually, let's apply this to 70 AD. In AD 71, after the destruction of Jerusalem, could they not receive forgiveness? Like the sinners who rejected the gospel, living hundreds of miles away from Jerusalem, they weren't persecuted by Roman soldiers. They weren't Jewish. They were Gentile. They just didn't believe in Jesus. They just didn't like Christians, just like sinners today. How did they get judged? How did they get judged? Well, there's no forgiveness for those?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that maybe would be if this really has nothing to do with anything other than Israel and the people of Israel. Can you go back to? Can you put that other one back up?
Yeah, Lily, I want to get to your question in a second. Hold on, let me see.
So, no, that's not the right. Yeah. So, if this book has absolutely nothing to do with Israel, and the ones who are cut off, it's like the ones who died in Moses, and they were. Yeah. How could they get? They can't repent after that. They can't jump into Christ if they were killed. And if He came and took them up, then they missed the boat.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said it because I always say like the failed saints. Like if Christ was not a failed prophet, then you have the Christians who failed to preserve the truth of full preterism. Like they all missed it. They all missed it. He goes, well, it happened in the invisible realm. Well, then how come none of the Christians had mentioned that? And this is, well, there's no historical record of it. I think
this is a thought too that I threw to Dallas when he was kind of first saying this. And I was like, okay, well then did they just come and find like whoever afterwards, the church, the Catholic Church or whatever, did they just come and find all this literature afterwards and there's nobody around anymore, like Ed Stevens was saying, and they're like, we could use this to like manipulate everybody. Let's like, you know what I mean? Like,
hey, some of the IO crowd said the same thing. Like, and it's just, when there's a lack of historical evidence, it's hard to say affirmatively, this is what took place.
Yeah, for sure.
And so it's like, but you need the grammatical historical method according to our hermeneutic, right? That's what it is, like the grammatical historical method. And when you don't have the history to back up a doctrine, then you can't say that that's what took place. So that's why for me, it's like, well, that's because nothing happened. For me, it's like, if there was historical documents of all the Christians of every nation, tribe, kindred, and tongue all throughout the world saying, we met Christ in the invisible realm, or the change of mortality took place. I know that Don draws upon like Eusebius and a few others. But like I said, like I credit that, but there's a lot of angles. Let me see here what Lily wants to say. She says, I guarantee that Don acts like you're ignoring everything he's saying and tries to make you look worse. I hope he's wrong. Yeah. Let me see here. She also said, do we find God or does God find us? Asking for a friend. I love it. What do you think?
To me, I mean, I was not looking for God at all. And like, I was, I mean, I don't want to get into it too much, but like basically what happened to me is like, it was my 19th birthday and I was on shrooms and I basically fell like a dead man. I couldn't talk. I couldn't move. And I had this like outer body experience and like, I had just like emerged from that. And I don't know. After that, all I cared about was God, thinking about God. I completely changed my life. Like in the drop of a hat, like, I mean, I was watching porno every day since I was 13 years old. Stopped that immediately. I dropped like 80 pounds. I was about to like run away from my parents. I started like working for my parents. I started treating other people differently. Like, I was not a good kid or before, and I was a musician since I was 13, but I never recorded any of my own songs. I started composing 10-minute long songs like out of a drop of a hat. Like my whole life changed like immediately. I had like a radical encounter with God to me, and it changed my entire life. I didn't start really like getting into the Bible till way later. And so that's why I've always said, like, I've had a relationship with God outside of this, and it had nothing to do with it for me. And like, that's just what happened. And
well,
so
Lily has something to ask that dovetails that. How do you know this is linked to the God of the Bible? Like, maybe this is a God, but it's not a God that's
sure,
tied to any particular religion. Maybe this God allows humans to make up religions and is like kind of watching us figure it out. Like, hey, look, humanity in the 21st century, a lot of them are exiting religion now. It's part of the video game. Like,
sure.
you know what
So
I'm
I
saying?
mean, I studied a lot of Vedic scriptures too, like the stuff from India, and I just
Nice.
what I thought, a lot of the things that God was teaching me, like treating people correctly, treating myself correct, a lot of the stuff that's like,
That's what I'm saying. Your morals
yeah,
and your ethics and your values is
yeah,
so pivotal. And
yeah,
so, like that's what the Christians say. They receive the Holy Spirit. There's a radical change in their neuropsychology. There's a radical change in their behavior that is observable, that you can analyze, and that people can see. So they go, the kingdom comes without observation. But if the coming of the Lord was the Roman soldiers besieging Jerusalem, there's a lot to observe there. I think that whole passage, well, the kingdom comes without observation. Number one, I don't think that's talking about the change of mortality or the meeting with Christ. But let's say if it does, then what was to observe with those first century saints when they reached that perfection, that super Christian, supernatural? Like, for example, they'd be like the angels of heaven. They would never marry nor give in marriage. Paul says, or excuse me, Don says that that's all metaphoric language. So then how does that apply? Where they are like an angel in heaven and they're not going to, how does that apply to them? You see what I'm saying? Like, how
yeah,
does that apply to their morals and their ethics, which was supposed to be perfected? It was supposed to be like Christ, like their husband when they were to get married. That's why he was telling them to be holy without spot and blemish. Don't sin. Don't have sex with harlots, Paul said.
sure,
You know what I mean? If those of you guys that are burning with passion, get married. He says better to marry than to burn. Some scholars say that he was talking about eternal judgment. But why was Paul doing all that? Well, because if they were not literally going to meet Christ, what was the whole point of it?
yeah. I mean, this is what whoever this is asking this. It's like, yeah, I mean, it's a good question. Honestly, but all I know is my own story, and it's like I changed radically, and anybody in my life, all of my family and friends knew
Yeah,
within 6 months that they were looking at some less than 6 months that I was a completely different person than I'd ever
completely
been my
different.
entire
Right.
life.
Right. And that's what I'm saying. So like
Yeah,
according to Christian, you were in the already stage. So then the not yet, the already but not yet. So like let's say you and I we have this experience, it changes us. We're living in the first century. When we hear about the Roman soldiers besieging Jerusalem, what upgrades us? Then what? How does that make us more of that virtuous person? Do you
yeah,
see what I'm saying? Like, what was the be transformed by the renewing of your mind? You're praying every day, you're fasting, you're staying away from sin, all those things that you believe is a violation of God's law. But there was supposed to be something greater. There was supposed to be a climax. So that's what I'm trying to say. What was that climax? What was it? Other than the Roman soldiers besieging Jerusalem. That what
yeah.
was
I
it?
don't.
I draw blanks in the full preterist paradigm. It's like I'm drawing blanks. Like
T-
change
t-
in mortality. It's just a status.
yeah, to me, it like how I think about it. It's like they're always up until this point was some kind of intermediary. Like you needed some priest to be with God. Like maybe that's not the case, and I'm making that up. But like that after this, it's like everybody had their own relationship with God. You
They
come
already
directly
had
to
that
me.
in the already.
Yeah,
You see what Don is doing? He's drawing from the wells of the already. They
yeah.
already had that. So after the yet, when they experienced the yet, they already had forgiveness of sins with
Well,
Christ. They already had
so
a propitiation. They already stopped animal sacrifice.
yeah,
And
I just think there
as
was a grace period to get as many of them along before the wrath. Like it's like there was a 40-year grace period, the wilderness.
right,
Those who were the grumblers are going to get
right,
axed, and those who aren't. To me, it's just like I don't get so hung up on the details, and I'm just like, look, I know God's real. This book's super cool. I'm trying to understand what's going on here. It might
yeah,
have no relevance whatsoever today, but I do believe, and it's not like I don't have to be good because there's plenty of times where I'm definitely not being good, and I
yeah,
know that's not like Xing me out from God, but it's like I also know the personal instructions that I do feel that God like holds me to, and when I don't do that, there's definitely some kind of internal consciousness being like, "Yo, what the hell are you doing?"
yeah. I get
Like,
that. I get
yeah.
that. Yeah, yeah,
Um, so and the whole and I was trying to tell my friend this the other day when I was talking about the Bible. It's like I don't think this has even helped me progress over time either. It's like what's progressed is just my own personal time with God. Like, yeah, I've definitely learned from this, but I've learned about the Bible, like not necessarily God. I think you only really learn God from your personal experiences. And yeah, I guess you can learn some. I don't even know what I'm saying anymore. I just know that it's
This
like,
guy's saying that finding God through shrooms usually means the person met a false prophet spirit. What do you think about that?
yeah, I don't. I think that's ridiculous. So I would say you would know them by their fruit, right? Like if a false is the fruit going to lead to like not doing horrible things like anymore? You know what I mean? Like you stop watching pornography, you get way healthier. You honor your father and mother. Like you're going to do a bunch of stuff that like the way you to me, I don't think it had anything to do with the shrooms besides just like letting go and like it all. It was like a platform potentially to just like kind of get out of my normal mind that allowed God to
Yeah, yeah,
jump in and
and I
reach
see
me.
it. But the
Yeah,
thing is, what gets me, Nick, is like, okay, that's not only happening in Christianity, though. That's happening in all other religions. Like a lot of them have these type of mystical experiences or whatever, and then it
yeah,
changes them. And their doctrines are completely antithetical. They're completely opposite to one another. You see what I'm saying? So
sure.
it's like I'm not trying to say that you did not have an encounter with the divine.
Yeah.
It's just like but those encounters and those life changes is not just tied to Christianity.
For
You know,
sure.
so
And
yeah.
most of the time I don't bring up, I almost wish I didn't even say that. Like I actually for years like never even added that to the story because of questions like that. I used to just like leave that part out of the story.
No, I've heard
Yeah.
people, I've heard plenty of people I witnessed to. So when they go, oh, I got drunk and the devil appeared to me, or I got high and I tapped into this spiritual realm and I saw everyone's faces like demons. I saw hell all over. They was tripping out, right? And they're like, man, I got to go to God. You know what I mean? I've heard stuff like that.
Well,
Um,
I mean, there's plenty of people who've taken shrooms and had that never happened to them whatsoever.
right,
So is it the
right.
shrooms? Like,
Yeah, people
I,
say like it opens up your neuropsychology to like either it's an hallucination or you tapped into the spiritual realm. Now, there's pastors who say that like, oh, you do those drugs, it's demonic, it's gonna make you,
I don't do
like the
them
devil.
anymore too. I haven't done them in years and years and years. Like
Oh,
that's
good.
not, yeah. So whoever
Yeah,
read
no,
that,
I,
it's like,
I've never taken shrooms. I've been
I
told to
know. That's
check
why
it
I
out.
asked you. Remember
Yeah,
when I did ask you? It's like
I
maybe
never.
this
I'm see,
dude.
I'm way too chicken. I'll probably trip out. I'll probably be like, where am I? So I don't want to have one of those moments. I like being in control. You know what I mean? I do have like some wine every now and then. I'll have like a little drink every now and then, but other than that, like, I'm pretty sober. Like I just feel like I'm just too old. I'm too old to be doing that. I was at the club the other day and I just had one shot of Fireball. That was it. That was good for me, and I had a wonderful time. So it was like,
Yeah,
I like the soberness, and it's amazing because I came from the Pentecostal background, so it's like it has to be like, you have to like really tap into the spirit, like it takes time, like you have to like pray for a while, you gotta like fast, you have to like really concentrate, right, to like really get plugged in with this feeling that you're in one with God. You know, that's where I was born and raised. And so like when you go into like a church service, you have people like walking around, speaking in tongues,
Sure.
playing music. It's like there's something experiential to it. It's not like going into a Catholic church. You just sit down. We call them
Yeah.
like dead dry.
Those are the
Dead dry.
churches that I went to too. I mean, I went to Assemblies of God churches and stuff
Yeah,
for a long
yeah,
time. Yeah. So
yeah. So I mean, you're familiar with it, you know. So it's
yeah.
like, you know, I've been around all that stuff, and so it's kind of like I still feel those same symptoms. Like when I'm happy, I could be working out, or whatever. I still feel the Holy Spirit. I'm
Yeah.
listening to like Red Hot Chili Peppers or something like that. I still feel the Holy
Sure.
Spirit. You know,
Yeah.
like
No, I get it.
yeah,
There's I don't think we have one of the hugest things is I know is like for you to think that the book of Revelation is about the future, that was a huge thing for me. There's no way that's what it's saying, and I'm sick and tired of those conversations. Like, so it's like the time text was the big one. All the details,
a
all the
better person.
details
Go ahead. I'm just
are
reading.
up for debate. And by the way, why we got off on that topic was because are you chosen or do you choose? I felt
Right.
chosen. I wasn't looking for it. With the drop
Yeah.
of a hat. The story I told was very minimal. Like there was way more changes that went on than that. It was like a radically different person, literally
Sure.
overnight. So
Sure. That's what it does.
yeah. But so
That's
what
what
did
it
that
does.
say before?
Let me see here. I forgot. A better person. You are not getting. We are in a test for. It probably means you are not getting better. We're in a test for an infinite afterlife. That whole test for the infinite afterlife.
Yeah, I mean, there's
You
definitely
know.
something potentially going on like that, but I do not focus on what happens after you die at all, and I don't. I honestly, the more and more I've been looking into it, I don't know even if the Bible is doing that. I do, and even my own personal life, God's not talking to me about that either. But if that is the case, why would we not just put all of our focus on how do I do exactly what I'm supposed to do in this life and be the best that I
Yeah.
can, and
And
like
that's what
what
the
happens
Jews.
happens.
Yeah, that's what the Hasidic Jews do. I was speaking to a Hasidic Jew in 2011 when I was in Israel. Oh, he was an Orthodox Jew. He wasn't Hasidic, but he was Orthodox. And
Uh-huh.
he had stated, well, you know, he goes, we don't get into that. He goes, well, at least where we come from, we don't get into those philosophical investigations like Jonah and David and you know, like these type of things. He goes, we don't get into those details. We just want to follow God's law, and then whatever happens happens. He goes, because what it does is it opens up questions that are just not fruitful. That's what he told me. He was a rabbi. He was a rabbi at the
Yeah,
time. Yeah,
you
he's
got
like,
it.
you know, yeah. People ask like, you know, did Jonah was in the whale for 3 days? How did he survive? You know, he goes, we don't get into none of that.
Yeah,
So it's
because
like,
it's that's what I'm saying. A lot of these details like that are just kind of stupid to me, like to like argue over that stuff. But it's like the details of someone trying to argue that Revelation's about the future. That's important because I think that's a huge. I spent a lot of time on that 5 years ago, looking who's the Antichrist, all that stuff. Like,
this is interesting. This is interesting right here. What Lily's bringing up. I hope in the infinite afterlife, I get my daily hook from Jesus. How long will the line be? I wonder.
I don't know.
Yeah, I
I
know.
hope you
Like I
get
said,
it too.
I often wonder, like, what's Christ doing up in heaven, right? Like his physical person, right? Like the one that was born of the Virgin Mary, the one with nail scarred hands, the one that ascended. He has to be in some sort of spatio-temporal reality in the transcendent world, even if it's not like space, how we understand it. Like he has to be somewhere up in heaven because he's not here. Like his physical body is not here. So like, is he like in some sort of hypnotic state, like at all time, kind of like Professor X, right? Like he's
Yeah,
plugged
yeah.
in and he's experiencing all the like the Matrix. That's like like he's just plugged in and he's
Yeah,
like
he's what is it?
experiencing what's happening
What's
in
that thing called
Africa.
that he wears?
I know what you're talking about. Yeah, like yeah, for him to have like like telepathy with everyone, he could like see their minds and all that. Like so, that's what I'm thinking. Christ is, or Christ is just like sitting down, just like you and I, and he's like his eyes are just wide open. He just has one facial expression.
Yeah.
Like for 2,000 years, like does he ever like stop and give his undivided attention to like Michael or Gabriel? Or maybe what does he stop? Does he get off the throne? Like what is his physical person doing?
But
You
do you
see,
see? Yeah, but I mean, this is obviously those kind of like unfruitful talks. No one has the answers to that. Like, what you know?
but that's what I'm trying to say, because when somebody says they have the mind of Christ, right? It's just like,
Yeah.
he says that you have the mind of Christ. Says it, let this mind be in you, which is also in Christ Jesus. Like, it even says like, let me go ahead and pull this up. This one's huge. I was debating Stephen Witsit, and he keeps saying that I'm using it wrong. And he says, who is you had, I said, the person without the Spirit does not accept the things that come from the Spirit of God, but considers them foolishness. He goes, the person with the Spirit makes judgments about all things, but such a person is not subject to mere human judgments. Who has known the mind of the Lord as to instruct him? But we have the mind of Christ. So, like, if we have the mind of Christ and we have the Spirit of Christ, we should at least be able to know what he's doing. If I have his mind and I have his Spirit, and I'm walking in his Spirit, and I talk to him, and I have a personal relationship. You see what I'm saying? Like, it's like saying, like, man, like, I have the mind of my dad. I share his mind. I have my dad's Spirit. I talk to him every day. So they go, so then where's your dad at? What's he been doing for 2,000 years? Oh, I don't know. you just you just you see what I'm
he's
saying? My
he's
goodness,
ruling and reigning.
that's exactly what you would expect if this is just an imaginary myth figure in your mind. Like, you wouldn't know. I know. So you don't have a personal relationship with him. You don't have his mind. You don't have a clue what he's saying or doing or feeling, and you don't have his Spirit. Because if you did, then you'd be able to tell me this. What I tell the Christians, it's just that simple. Same thing with, like, any close friend or relative.
So, hey, who's the one that wrote that thing about the false prophet and the shrooms? Who wrote that earlier? Can you still see the comments or
Let me
no?
see here. The
I don't
false
know how that
prophet.
works.
Oh, that was his name is Joseph. I actually have a guy coming on. His name is Objective Ethics. Do you mind if he joins the conversation?
I don't care.
Yeah, I've never talked to him in person before, so
I,
he's coming on my
I'd
channel
be
for the first
curious.
time.
They said that was such like like who told them that? Where have they heard that? He like said it like, oh, I've heard this. Like, who'd you hear that from? It's a weird thing to say, honestly.
I'm gonna go ahead and pull it up. But Objective Ethics, what's up? How are you
Yeah,
doing?
what's good, brother? It's nice to finally talk to you.
Yeah,
Yo,
same. Well, you got the floor, man. What's happening? What's on your mind?
No, I just actually came in. I know you and I are supposed to chop it up one of these days. I wanted to talk to you about maybe do something on your show about the origins of atheism and agnosticism, because I know
Okay.
that's something that people get really confused about. But that's not why I came on here today. I just came on here today to stand up for the brother, because even though I myself am agnostic, I think it's really disrespectful for people to be kind of hammering on Mr. Nick here about his personal experiences. That's one thing. Whenever I have discussions or debates with theists, I will never discredit their personal testimony. I think that's really disrespectful. If the guy wants to talk about how his beliefs have changed his lifestyle for the better, I think that's
Sure.
something that we should treat with respect. Whether that moves the needle for me personally, I'm not going to say that's going to make me a believer or not. But I really do think it's shameful that people are giving him a hard time talking about his mushroom trip and everything. It takes a lot of balls to get on here and in front of a crowd of people and talk about how this thing has changed his life and how he used to, do porn or whatever he's talking about, getting over. And I think he deserves a lot of credit for at least having the nuts to do that. It's a shame that people in the chat are giving him a hard time about that. And it's not just coming from the atheists or whatever. It's coming from people who I'm assuming are actually Christians themselves. And it's like, who do you people, whose side are you on,
Yeah, Nick, you want to say something to that?
yeah, like I said, I actually, it's not like I've shared my testimony a bunch, but I've definitely shared it. A lot of times, especially at churches, I wouldn't say that part just because to
Sure.
me it's not super pertinent. Like I said earlier, it's like plenty of people have taken shrooms and that didn't happen. So it's
Right.
like
Right.
I just think God could do whatever He wants, and I just know that it was like a radical change. Never was the same person. Don't use them now, and it's like I don't encourage people to use them. And I know a lot of people talk about like sorcery and witchcraft, and I mean, I was a drug addict, a sex addict, all that kind of stuff, and it's like, boop, gone. Like I've had some issues with. I mean, I'm 37 now, with the reemergence of drugs like way later on and stuff, but that's not a thing anymore. And it's like, I love God, love studying the Bible, wanted to be like Jesus, like after that, but it just, I started going a couple of years later, started going to church and serving in a church as the audio engineer for years and years. And, it's like, I don't know. That's why I was asking, like, where did this guy hear like this false prophet thing? Like, that's why I was be curious to,
Yeah, that
I'm
stuff's wild.
definitely,
I mean, I think the scriptures are pretty clear that the Christian theology is definitely a deterministic. The scriptures are pretty clear about that. God is going to call who's going to call. Not everyone who calls me Lord, Lord is going to, I'm not going to, is going to enter the kingdom of heaven. So it really seems pretty obvious to me when you actually read the scriptures that God is the one who's determining who's in and who's out. And so I think your story is kind of evidence of that. Now, I know other people have different stories. People see that, seek and you shall knock, knock and the door will be open to you, that kind of thing. Seek and you shall find. So, you can find a lot of different things you want to in the scriptures, but I think the overall message is that God's the one who softens hearts. God's the one who hardens hearts. Not everyone's going to get into heaven.
So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. So that's why we got off on that was yeah, I've always felt chosen. Like I felt like God said, "Yo, come hang out with me," and just grabbed me out of nowhere. It's not something I never thought about anything like that. I was 19 years old and never even gave a crap about that. And when some people have asked me, like, who don't know God and don't know anything about that, and I've straight up told people, if that's something you're interested in, sometimes I think people do have to chase it down. Ask God every day, even if it's for 2 years straight. But beg God, fast, dude. Like if you really want to know God, I do think God will show up. But I think God, maybe depending on who you are and how hard your heart is, if you really want it, and even though it might take a while, like I have no doubt that they would like be transformed and come to know God. I just think certain people, maybe their pride or whatever, they would have to go hunt it down. But I do feel blessed that I didn't have to do that. I still got to chase. You still got to chase God down every day now, though. And I mean, be on guard and not. I mean, you do. I do think it's like you reap what you sow, and you'll reap it in this world. And so I try to sow good seeds. I'm actually an arborist, and I plant trees and take care of trees. And it's like, yeah, I try to sow the things that I think are the currency of a kingdom of God, which is, things like generosity and peace and patience and it's like, so all that kind of stuff is I try to love people, take care of people, even give money to, I don't believe in abortion, all that kind of stuff. I try to help the widows and the orphans. Like, so all that stuff matters to me, and none of that stuff, I don't have to do any of that to get to heaven. And even if I don't do it, God's not going to take it. Or even when I even say that, like I'm saying, I don't even know what I think about what happens after I die, but I know God's with me regardless of what I choose. And even if I'm making choices that I know that I shouldn't, I still feel God's with me and probably just being like, yo, bro, like, can you cut that out? Like, let's go do this instead. So no matter what, I feel like God's with me. And obviously I would want to just walk in a way that would be a blessing to my life and a blessing to other people's life. So.
Well, I just think, whatever is causing you to make good choices in life, that's all that matters, that you're making good choices in life. If you want to believe in a God or whatever, you're not hurting my life with that, kind of thing as far as that goes. Now, if you want to start making, getting to a point to where that impacts how you vote, like if you want to vote against gay marriage or against divorce or something, like that's where I would have a problem with it. You know what I mean? Because I think, people do use religion to affect the way that they vote and the kind of laws they want to make, and that's where marginalized communities get hurt from religion. And that's the thing I don't like. But as far as your own personal life goes, if you want to use it as motivation to not use drugs or to stay away from porn, if that's a problem for you, or whatever you're using it for motivation for, to treat others like you want to be treated, I don't think there's anything wrong with that personally. I'm not an anti-theist just because I'm not religious myself. I don't need religion to not use drugs. I don't need religion to treat other people well because I believe in, the golden rule. I believe that as a social animal, if I don't want people to steal from me, the best way I can, to promote that is to not steal from other people. You know what I mean?
For sure. Yeah. No, that's why I think, like I'm saying, you reap what you sow. I mean, but I do believe the Bible does teach the golden rule. Like,
Oh, sure.
so,
But the Bible,
yeah.
I mean, those rules that you find in the Bible, they didn't start in the Bible. I mean, these have been well established by religions that are far older than the Bible. I think you guys mentioned Zoroastrianism. Zoroastrianism had a huge influence on Judaism during the Persian period, long before Christianity was even a thing.
Really?
the Jewish religion started out as a henotheistic kind of concept. When the Jews came out of, before they were even Jews, before they were really Hebrews, when they came out of the land of Canaan, El was their primary god. Yahweh was a secondary god. Asherah was the consort to El. Then they kind of get amalgamated. Yahweh takes the place of El. Asherah kind of disappears, and then this Yahweh God becomes kind of like an embodiment of different kinds of God concepts. And you can see the influences of these different religions over the course of several hundred years. Zoroastrianism was a huge one. Platonism, the Greek Stoicism. I mean, if you really study those things, you can see where these concepts have come from long before these religions were ever developed. You look at the Levitical laws, and you go back to like the Code of Hammurabi, and you can see, these laws were in place throughout the Mediterranean long before these religions were ever established. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
not saying that it's not, whatever source you want to get it from.
Yeah.
But these are not the original source of these laws, these
Yeah, I think this is
ideas.
why, yeah, if I can interject, I think this is why people believe that morals and ethics is just a product of evolutionary psychology, like how Christopher Hitchens used to state that, we didn't come from religion. Religion came from us. Like, we invented religion, and the morals and the ethics that we have is tied to these various religions because we're the ones who tied them to it, So morals and ethics is something that our species evolved, and we have evolved morally and ethically. I mean, look at 1,000 years ago. What it was considered to be, morally acceptable is not acceptable now in the 21st century. I wonder how humanity is going to look like 1,000 years from now. Maybe, people make the vegan argument, maybe humanity will stop eating animals, look at that as being immoral, unethical, or whatever. We don't know what the world is going to be like, but we do know that cultural society will evolve morally and ethically. Now, I think that there are some foundational morals and ethics that should not be altered, like stealing, murder, rape, stuff like that. Like, those are basic fundamental ones that even the animal kingdom, respond to. Other primates, chimpanzees, gorillas, they seem to share, some similar foundational morals and ethics that we can't really explain its origins. That's why some people believe in some sort of deity out there that kind of like downloaded this within us. Or did it just somehow evolve through evolutionary psychology? And there's no Bible to address this, specifically and tell us how it all came to be. But there's interesting topics, interesting
Well,
topics. Lisa.
you're absolutely right. There is a naturalistic explanation for all of it, being that we are a social animal, and there's a perfectly reasonable natural explanation to it. A lot of this, what people, before they really understood the psychology of the human mind, it's referred to as the God of the gaps fallacy. And this
Yeah.
is a part of the human brain. What we do is, it's called the HADD. What does that stand for? The hyperactive agency detection device. It's located in the central cortex of the brain. And it is, as a species, as an animal, we have a tendency to want to give agency to things. So, you've heard it before that, our ancient ancestors, when they heard the rustling in the bushes, you know, it's better for our survival as a species if we determine that that's actually a bear and not the wind or not some god, causing the leaves to blow. And then
Yeah.
if we find out, oh, that's a bear that's making that noise, I better avoid that, and I have a better chance of survival. But before we determined what these things were, so that, like, there was it's an animism was kind of the belief system. So the thunderclouds were a god, the wind was a god, the rain was a god. Then as we start to learn, oh, this has to do with atmospheric pressure, and there's a natural explanation. Suddenly, the god gets pushed further and further and further away. This is
Yeah.
just a
Yeah.
natural part of the way the human brain works.
Yeah. 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 That's very true. And I think in 1,000 years from now, it could be that we push religion completely out. Like, like that could be something that's archaic. I mean, can you imagine, like, 1,000 years from now, let's say in the history books, yeah, people used to believe in religions. We don't believe
Yeah,
that
I
anymore.
think that we are moving in that direction. It'll be interesting, though. I don't know how much you guys have studied about other different forms of religion, but there's this animism I kind of mentioned. There's panpsychism, so
Yeah.
that we may end up pushing religion down to this where it's just kind of a deity concept, as opposed to being a personalized God. I could see something like that happening. I don't know
Yeah.
if we're ever going to completely get rid of, because as an agnostic, and if you're an agnostic, you probably understand that one of the parts about agnosticism is we don't believe that anything is known or can be known about any gods or anything supernatural because it's unfalsifiable. So
Right.
even the brother's personal testimony, I would push back if I was going to give him pushback on that and say, you don't have any way of knowing whether or not that's all in your head. You know what I mean? You
Yeah.
would never know if a god actually talked to you or not because there's just no way to test it. So at some point, we might push this God concept back to where it's just out there, But a personal God, I think we're getting ready to do away with all that stuff. It's getting to be pretty ridiculous. The study of history and the study of science has basically debunked almost all the claims that come from this personal relationship. The history behind the religion and everything else.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Here we have Lily. She states, I do think Christian morals and ethics do make our world better in a lot of ways. Yeah, like if everybody became a Christian, then everybody would be turning the cheek. Everybody would be forgiving your enemies. But I do question Jesus's teachings a lot, especially like turning the cheek and forgiving your enemies. Like, yeah, in a perfect world, if nobody was acting upon those carnal desires or whatever, that would be great, but the thing is like, if I use that in a practical sense, we wouldn't have a nation. Like, we wouldn't have a military defense system if our military just turned the cheek to, the Muslims or Islamic countries that want to persecute us, or China, or whoever wanted to go to war with us. If we just turn the cheek and forgive our enemies, then we wouldn't have a defense department in our country. But if everybody did become that way, like I like to say, like a hyper hippie, then yeah, there'd be no more wars. I'm hoping that one day there's no more wars. That would be something archaic too. But a lot of wars that happen are happening because of religion. I mean, goodness. So it's like, what
I
can you
think
say
they're
about that?
used. Yeah, I mean, it's a tool of manipulation a lot of the times, for sure.
Oh
And
But
yeah,
you talk about Christian morals though, and I think that's that's just people misunderstanding the history behind where these morals come from and stuff. And if you look at the statistics, the most peaceful countries in the world, the most peaceful nations are Buddhists. The
Mhm.
Abrahamic religions are some of the most violent countries in the world. So you talk about these Christian morals, and it's like, no, no, no. If you want to look at the evidence, look at places like Thailand, 97% Christian, some of the lowest crime rates in the entire world. When's the last time Thailand was involved in a war? You know what I mean? Look at, so just look at,
Well, yeah. I mean, the part of the problem is people could just say like America, like we're Christians, but they're not really Christian. They don't really. And I'm starting to even. There's so many people who just say that, but they act nothing like Christ. So, I mean, can you really say that you're a Christian? It's like I see your point for sure, just to, it's like I said earlier, like I've actually looked into the Vedas a lot, and their scripture has tons of really cool stuff too. I mean, they even have like a 10 commandment: watch what you say, watch what you eat, watch how you treat people. Have a clean life, don't steal, don't non-violence. All that type of stuff is in there that would be beneficial to humanity. There's something innate in us that we know we're not supposed to do that kind of stuff, and it's people violating their own nature. That I think
well,
that's the
Tristan
problem.
actually touched on that when he mentioned primates and like other social animals. If you look at the way that a pack of wolves treats members of it within its own community, you know what I mean? As far as how they handle things, like they actually do address theft, murder, things of this nature, caring for the sick, members of their tribe. And these are just animals. These are dogs. You know what I mean? Imagine
right.
how much more we're going to be evolved in those kind of concepts.
Yeah. And the major thing that separates us from the animals is language. Like, if they were able to articulate the way we articulate, then there'd be like Planet of the Apes, they'd be, if they're able to utilize tools like we do, like manipulate objects, and if they were able to teach the later generations, they would be just like us in every way. Even if you had
Well,
like a talking dog, but they're not as sophisticated. They don't have introspection to the capacity we have, retrospection to the capacity that we have. So it's the language barrier is what's separating us from them. And that's pretty much the only thing. Like, if humanity didn't have a language and we were just all like the animals, we wouldn't have a judiciary system. That's why we don't.
No, it's really interesting when you look back in history and you really look at when the first civilizations, actual what we would consider civilized groups of people, and it really stems from the adoption of the language, the cuneiform writing system. Then you go back to the
Yeah,
Sumerians. You know what I mean? I mean, really, it's at this point in time when you start to see the evolution of things like religion, because people
yeah,
were
yeah,
living in communities and groups successfully without all this stuff. It wasn't
yeah,
until all of a sudden you get large civilizations and you adopt the written language, and all of a sudden now you start to have these major religious beliefs that seem to be tied to civilization. But civilization
yeah,
was,
yeah.
communities were thriving without religious doctrine or religious dogmas. But when you get large groups of people together, I can't remember if it was Voltaire or who's the one that said, if you want to get a lot of people to do some really terrible things, use religion as the motivator,
Yeah, and teach it to the children.
This is why this kind
children.
of conversations are important too, though. It's like, I think full preterist was like a stepping stone to being like, what the hell is, at least for the Christians, what is actually even going on in this book? Because I think we've got it way wrong, and it's been used in all kinds of crazy ways. And so I think, we're asking the right questions.
Lily states, I mean, Christian morals as in we ignore all of the Old Testament, but we're nice to people and we keep families intact. Watered down Christianity isn't too bad.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
Yeah, how far do you go with like some of the dogmas that Paul taught, like deliver him over to Satan for the destruction of his flesh. Like, if there's a brother named among you who's a fornicator or drunkard, idolatry, don't even eat with the man. What if that was
But look what Jesus himself taught. I know there's a real schism within the church as far as within the Christianity group of what Jesus actually taught about the law. But the New Testament is quite clear that Jesus was a Jew and Jesus thought we should be following the Jewish law. And the Jewish law is the law of Moses. And I know there's a lot of debate, people trying to separate, well, he actually meant just the moral law, and we're supposed to do away with these other laws and this and that. But that's not what Jesus said. Not one jot, not one tittle shall be removed from the law. If you want to go to heaven, you follow the law. And he's very clear about that. You read Matthew 5.
I would disagree with that completely.
Of course you would. I know. I know you would. I know you would. And you're allowed to have your opinion, but I'm just talking about what's written in the Bible itself. Not one jot, not one tittle. Jesus says, if you want to go to heaven, you follow the law. Matthew 5.
He says, until heaven and earth pass away, not one jot or tittle.
That's right.
Heaven and earth is in a literal
heaven and earth haven't passed away. I mean,
you're taking that's not what the Bible teaches about what heaven and earth is, though. We're not talking about the planet Earth.
Come on now. Heaven and earth is what.
No,
has Earth passed away?
Earth is not planet Earth. Heaven and earth is a system, a people group, a temple system. It has nothing to do with the planet Earth and some dimensional heaven. This is not one jot or tittle there until the Mosaic system is gone, and then the law is gone. All the jot and tittles are done after that. You don't have to do the jot and the tittles.
Which is why when God gave the law to Moses, he said, you're going to follow it forever. Because words don't mean words.
Well, so it's raining cat and dogs. This is words. Yeah. This is a system from 4,000 years ago.
Objective ethics. He's a full preterist. So essentially what he's saying is that like heaven and earth is just a metaphoric language that reflected
I understand he's reading it as a metaphor, but he's reading metaphor into it.
Well, okay,
it's very convenient. You can do that with anything you want to. You can read anything as a metaphor if you want to. If it's inconvenient for the situation as it is, you just go ahead and it's called pressure. You just reinterpret it. Yeah, just reinterpret it however you need to.
Even if you guys are both like opposing, you still have Acts 15 where they had the meeting and they said which customs for the Mosaic law are going to be bestowed upon the Gentiles. That was drawing upon the law of Moses because the Gentiles were receiving the Holy Spirit. They were speaking in tongues. So they had a meeting. They go, what customs from the law of Moses are going to be bestowed upon the Gentiles? He said, abstain from fornication, meat offered to idols, and the drinking of blood. And he says that it seems good to us and the Holy Spirit that we will lay upon the Gentiles no such burden. So even if we say, well, heaven and earth is the literal cosmos, or it's just a metaphor of their Hebraic cultists, you still have the apostles that delineate this and say, well, these are the only customs of the Mosaic law that we're going to hold the Gentiles accountable to. So that'd be interesting to see what full preterists say about that, because, if the law passed away, then what moral law do we follow after the law is finished? You go, well, you follow the law of Christ. But this is why Max King became a universalist, and Max King was the mentor of Don Preston. He's one of the founding fathers of this whole covenant eschatology thing, this full preterist thing. He became a universalist because then what law do we follow after the law of Moses has passed away, every jot and tittle? Even if it was 70 AD, then what moral law?
Plus you're talking about what the apostles taught, what Paul taught. You're not talking about what Jesus taught.
Yeah,
you're talking about how they interpret their interpretation of
their interpretation. Yeah. I understand there could be a contradiction. I understand that, or it could be reformed or something like that. I get that. Like what Jesus said, maybe the apostles meant something different as the decades go by.
Yeah.
I could see that. I take the critical approach. Here's what BC Camp for Light says, Hebrews 5:14. But solid food is for those who are full grown, who by reason of use have their sense exercised to discern good and evil. What do you guys think about that in Hebrews?
Will you put it back up?
Oh, let me see. But solid food is for those who are full grown, who by reason of use have their senses exercised to discern good and evil. Yeah, I wish that, there would be a lot of Christians or spiritual people who can really discern good and evil. One of the things I disagree with Paul on, one of many, is when he said, don't go to the law. He says if there's like a dispute amongst like the brethren in Christian churches, he said, don't go to the law, because he says they're not somebody who can judge among you. Like you're going to bring a reproach on Christianity by you going to the secular, worldly, carnal people to take them to court. Literally, Paul told them, don't go to the law. You guys should judge among you. I totally disagree with that. There have been many pastors who have tried to hide pedophilia and child molestation within churches because of that one passage. Plenty of people, especially over here in the West, for decades, they said, no, we're not going to go to the police because Paul said, don't go to the law. You're going to bring
That's
a reproach
insane.
upon Christ. Yes, you see, so, and that's what Paul said. And if you try to implement that, then don't go to the law, don't go to the police. And there are many, many pastors who have done that. And like, you have these documentaries now that are finally coming up. Yeah, I was molested in church for decades in the 70s, whatever. And look, now it's finally hit. Why didn't they go there? Oh, because the Bible says don't go to the law. Don't go to the secular law because you're going to bring a reproach to
But
our
yeah,
church.
you're also, I think you're really, you're people that use Paul so much. It's very interesting to me because not only is a lot of what he's written highly contested as to whether or not it's even his letters, I think there's a lot of
Yeah.
interpolation within the authentic letters of Paul personally. Plus, you're talking about a guy who admits to being a two-faced liar. I am the Pharisee of Pharisees. I'm the Hebrew of Hebrews. To the Jews, I'm a Jew. To the Gentiles, I'm a Gentile. I don't engage in these customs unless I'm with these people. Then of course I'm going to engage in their customs. You know what I mean? Like, what are you saying right now? What do you actually stand for? If you don't stand for anything, you'll fall for anything,
Yeah, he says you can win them over to Christ. Yeah, that's interesting. Another one is like Paul's over here talking about like when a woman reaches the flower of her age. I use this one a lot. The Christians, he says like when a woman reaches the flower of her age, then you can marry her and have sex with her. 1 Corinthians 7. The flower of her age was when a woman reached her menstrual cycle. So she was like 12, 13 years old. And he says that you can marry her at 12, 13, 14. Well, that is unacceptable today in the 21st century. You'd be considered a pedophile if you did that. So if you applied that Pauline ethic, marry her at the flower of your age, is better to marry than to burn with passion. When she reaches the flower of her age, then marry her. Well, Paul, sorry, that may have been acceptable in that time, but that cannot be acceptable today and should not be acceptable because we know now through neuroscience that your prefrontal cortex is not yet fully developed. So it's best that you're at that 18 above year of age for the age of consent. You see, so it's like you have a secular law that's in contrast to Pauline ethic. And which one is the Christian going to uphold to? That you could have sex with a girl and marry her at 12, 13 years of age, flower of her age, or the state law, which is, here in our country that you have to wait until, you're 18, the age of consent. Like which one is of God? Which one is considered to be holy? You see what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah, it's
God,
very
For sure.
interesting how God's supposedly objective morals are real reflective of a specific time period.
yeah, really, exactly.
Because
Exactly right.
something that's objectively good is always good. There's no limit to the time. It doesn't apply to a specific time or not.
Exactly.
If it's objectively good, it's either true or it's not true.
Yeah, yeah, and it should last throughout, all generations of the human species, right? Like,
Exactly.
yeah, yeah. Well, interesting talks, you guys. I mean, I know we've been 2 hours in. Nick, you've been such a good sport, man. Thank you so much. You're pretty incisive on this. Objective ethics. What was your name again?
Yeah, Daniel. Yeah.
Daniel. Well, yeah, man, we got to get together. Both you guys are very articulate, and it'd be great. We have some more, some more insight. I like hearing from the both of you guys. It would be great. Any other topics you guys want to discuss?
I mean,
No,
just briefly.
I'll jump off now, but yeah, Tristan, I do want to get together and do that. Let's talk about the origins of agnosticism and atheism and how those those words have actually evolved over the millennia, because people use those words in such different ways these days. And I hear theists attacking atheists, and they don't even understand what atheism is. I've had atheists get mad at me because I tell them what agnosticism is, and they don't believe me. They just literally nobody seems to know what they're actually talking about, and it just comes from a lack of education. And we're living in a world where words are losing their meaning. You know what I mean? We can call anybody anything that we want, and I think that for the purpose of having a productive and a civil conversation with somebody, you need to find out where they're at and where they're coming from. And so if we can have some clarity, in these when we use these terms, and I think that would be really helpful for people moving forward.
So, hey, bro, just literally, I was about to say the same thing to you. You literally just said words are losing their meaning. The words of the 4,000 years ago and how they used words, if you read heaven and earth as meaning the literal planet Earth or dimensional heaven, you're going to be way off. If you believe the stars fall and crash to the earth, the sun blackens out, and words mean words, right? That means the sun's going to blacken. No, bro. Like, these are metaphorical, like language that's used all over the Bible. And you can't and we're so far removed from this culture, those words don't mean the same thing to us. And even if they did, they were using them in a different way. So it's just funny how you just said that. And then we're talking about 4,000 years ago, and we're talking a couple hundred, 100 years, 50 years of using these words differently.
Oh no, these agnosticism and atheism, they go back to the Greek Dark Ages. But as far as what you're talking
that's
about,
not the point I was making. But yeah.
Okay, but the point to your point though is I stand by what I said. That they actually, words did mean something then, they mean something now. If you're gonna just add any kind of creative meaning to it, you're welcome to do that. If it makes you sleep better at night or whatever, that's perfectly fine. It doesn't. I'm not losing any sleep at night over it. You know what I mean? However you want to interpret it is fine. But to try and tell me that I can't read it as a direct interpretation, or I can't apply the context, because you have to understand that the way that we figure this out is through context. That's how because when we're interpreting, especially when we're trying to transliterate from one language to another, if we don't have the context, we have no idea what we're talking about, because the Hebrew didn't even use vowel system, right? So when the Masoretic text was translating this stuff, right, there wasn't even a vowel system. They had to put the vowels in there. How do we know that they got anything right? Well, the reason we know they got it right, or we have a pretty good guess that they got it right, and we can have some confidence in it, is because of the context of the words themselves. So that's the whole point of it all, is you have to look at the context. So if you're taking things completely out of context, so when the Mosaic law is being handed down, and God says, this is forever, this is your generation, for your generation and their generation and the next generation, and this is to be followed forever. The context tells us pretty clearly that means for freaking ever. It doesn't mean until another time down the road, when in about 600 years from now, we're going to rewrite this all, and we're going to put this whole different spin on it. And we're going to not try and pretend that forever only meant until heaven and earth pass away. Oh, and then we're going to redefine what heaven and earth are. That's a whole different spin on it, that you guys are just adding layers and layers and layers to what was originally written, that has an original context, that was very clearly written in its original context.
So you're literally thinking that they're talking about the planet Earth there? Yeah, this is something I think you need to study out a little bit more, bro, honestly. So just my 2 cents.
Well, I appreciate your advice. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you, you guys. This is what theological discussions are for. And I understand the heaven and earth argument, Nick. It's pretty much reflecting like the temple. Don Preston, he wrote a book, "The Elements Shall Melt with Fervent Heat." That it really didn't mean like the elements. He's talking about like objects and elements from the temple, or whatever. And I think this it's worthy of discussion. I think, to me, it doesn't matter how you choose, whether you look at the literal cosmos or if you look at the temple being destroyed. There's still a whole bunch of problems, whether it was fulfilled or it wasn't fulfilled. There's still a whole bunch of problems. And I like, Nick, how you had stated that you're fine even if the Bible has no relevance, or like the story doesn't have any relevance for us today. You know what I mean? Obviously the many full preterists are gonna disagree with you, right? So it's like, to me, I feel like I'm appreciative for full preterism. I disagree a lot with what they teach, but I'm glad that it led me where I'm at, and I think that full preterism has led you to a good spot too. But yeah, Daniel, it's great hearing from you, man. I mean, you're pretty incisive, and hey, if you guys want to talk about new heavens and new earth and have like a debate on it, that'd be great. I mean, let me know. I mean, both you guys are more than welcome to, talk on the podcast.
All right, brother. I'll catch up with you later. Nick, I hope you have a great day today, brother.
You too, bro.
All right, man. We'll keep in touch.
Later, Tristan.
Later, you guys.